The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by X-Chair, the X-Chair office chair. xchairthom.com is the website, xchairthom.com. The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com. Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242 or visit tomsbeets.com. Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from Edward Nell's new book, Progress and Poverty in Economics. The subtitle, Henry George and How Growth in Real Estate Contributes to Inequality and Financial Instability. This is from the introduction, which is subheaded, Reviving the Work of America's Most Original Economist. Andrew Mazzone and I collaborated on a project to review the work of the 19th century American economist Henry George, especially his landmark book, Progress and Poverty, 1879, to see how George's work stood up in the light of modern economics and to determine what could be brought up to date and applied to the contemporary world. We wanted to establish that George's work was relevant and also to criticize American economists for having overlooked or rejected George, both in his own time, when his work was a worldwide sensation, and afterward, even today. Andrew died suddenly in the middle of the project. This book is a tribute to him and completes what we began. George began his career as an author and public personality with Progress and Poverty, arguing that progress brought poverty in its wake and that poverty might even outpace progress, an important original point of view that has not lost any of its relevance since George's time. In fact, in our age of burgeoning inequality, it may be more relevant today than ever before. The grounds for this paradoxical interlinking of progress and poverty lay in the effect of rising rents. For George, rents were payment, not for the use of land in the usual sense, but for pure access to specific places and locations. But why should some people have the right to limit others' access to the use of the earth? Surely it belongs to us all. Worse, the limiting of access by demanding payment would undermine the benefits of innovation and hard work. To prevent this linking of progress and poverty, George said a major policy shift in taxation was required. This is well known among economists as the Georgist single tax on rents, or the Henry George theorem. Since George's time, there has been progress both in the economy itself and in economic analysis. The economy has been growing, and growth models have become highly sophisticated, in many cases focusing on matters that were central to George a century earlier. But that progress has also led to poverty, obvious in the economy itself. Our mainstream economics is also poverty-ridden, stricken. Our analytical models do not explain the persistence of poverty very well, nor do they account for crises and crashes, let alone the recent and stubborn growth of inequality. The mainstream theory of income distribution, marginal productivity, which assumes diminishing returns for all these factors of production and the markets will coordinate their adjustment, distribution is hopelessly flawed. George rightly rejected an early version of it. And contemporary economic theory has almost completely lost sight of rents and real estate, even though real estate was center stage in the global financial crisis of 2008, a crisis directly resulting from speculation in the housing market. And in 2016, Donald Trump, a real estate developer whose rise to power is intimately linked to rents and real estate speculation, was elected president. With a solid Republican majority in Congress, he began to implement a set of relentlessly regressive trickle-down economic policies that can be expected to lead to more poverty among vast segments of the population. Andrew and I wanted to find insights and tools in George's thought to counter this trend, to support progress and alleviate poverty. Before Andrew died, we had settled on 5 main points in George's writing that we wanted particularly to explore. 1, George emphasized cooperation as well as competition in regard to increasing productivity. He saw that the division of labor and cooperation as settlements developed on new land created value in location and generated increases in output while bringing about innovation. This is what generated the differentials on which rent is based, as we will explain. Number 2, George and his followers claimed that the total value of land in a region would tend to equal the value of the aggregate output of that region. 3, further, they claimed that total rents would tend to equal the costs of government, so that taxing rents would pay for government. And number 4, they contended that unless prevented by an activist government, inequality in wealth and income, roughly between the upper and lower classes, but also between other significant groups, would tend to rise inexorably. And number 5, and finally, George repeatedly attacked land speculation and its tendency to withdraw land from productive use and to promote concentration, a point that seemed to, both Andrew and myself to have a direct bearing on today's world. Only today it's not land alone, but finance generally that is subject to speculative excesses. I wrote up notes on theory while Andrew worked on rents, cost of government, land values, and GNP. I eventually put our notes together into 2 more or less finished articles to present at the annual conference of the Eastern Economics Association in New York City. Economists have given George short shrift, which is a shameful oversight. He has much to teach us. He was uniquely American, perhaps our greatest economist, certainly our most original. He is justly famous and heralded in the 19th century in his book Progress and Poverty, which is the source for much of our analysis on these pages.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Occupying the media 3 hours a day, 5 days a week. Thom Hartmann here with you. Greetings, my friends, patriots, lovers of democracy, truth, and justice, believers in peace, freedom, and the American way. Yesterday afternoon, an article I wrote went up on alternate.org, and it's about the Trump descent into hyper-authoritarianism. And I listed a set of characteristics that we saw when Italy went fascist, that we saw when Spain went fascist, that we saw when Venezuela went neo-fascist, commie-fascist, whatever you want to call it, that we saw in Mugabe's government, that we're seeing with Duterte in the Philippines. We saw it with Erdogan in Turkey. We saw it with Viktor Orban in Hungary. Every single one of these things, pretty much in this order. Number 1, as Eisenhower talked about, as Franklin Roosevelt talked about in 1944, lie often and lie big. For example, last night, Donald Trump told a whole series of lies in his rally there in Tennessee on behalf of Marsha Blackburn. We can get into those a little later on. Number 2, consolidate power while challenging or co-opting the institutions that might hold you accountable. That would be like the courts. Number 3, attack the press. This is something that autocrats and authoritarians always do. Number 4, vilify protesters and political enemies. Number 5, scapegoat minority groups to rile up a mob mentality against them. Number 6, elevate one religion that you can control and reward while trashing others. Number 7, co-opt and make institutions of military and police power into loyal sycophants by, for example, exempting police unions from your crackdown on state employees like Scott Walker did. And, talking how much you love the beat cops. And finally, ignore competence and incompetence. Only loyalty matters. Oh, and foster a sense of helplessness among the opposition. So those are the characteristics that I'm seeing. And, let's get Julio Rivera in here, the editorial director of Reactionary Times, columnist with Newsmax, Right-Wing News, and Politichicks. ReactionaryTimes.com is his website. His Twitter handle is, oh, yeah, it's Julio. Julio, welcome back to the program.
Hey, how are you today, Tom?
Great. Great to have you with us. So does it concern you that these cardinal characteristics of authoritarian rule that are popping up all over the world are being run through by the Trump administration as if they had just, yesterday read The Prince by Machiavelli and said, hey, here's our manual?
Oh, well, Tom, I kind of parsed through your alternate piece there, and, I was quite wordy, and I didn't really grasp, or I didn't really understand where you were taking it, to be honest with you. If you look at Trump, his presidency has been about deregulating, so less government intrusion into the life of citizens.
Or
And
fewer
look
government
no
protections
further-
from the predations of corporations.
Okay, but I also wanted to make this point as well. Look no further than his Supreme Court nomination, Judge Neil Gorsuch, who's always been a champion for limiting the power of the executive branch and maintaining the separation of powers.
And giving that power over to big corporations. And that was one of the points in the article, is that, you trash the judiciary. Mitch McConnell refused to allow President Barack Obama to have his constitutionally mandated appointment to the Supreme Court. And so instead, we get Neil Gorsuch, as you point out. I mean, that's one of the things that tells me that McConnell and Trump are running the fascists' playbook.
Well, I mean, the Senate also has the power to advise and consent when it comes to things like that. So if they didn't want to bring up, the Barack Obama nominee, to a vote, I mean, that's something that was kind of discretionary. And
I'm saying McConnell is complicit in this fascism.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well.
And it blows my mind that a conservative is not freaked out about the possibility of fascism.
Well, because I don't believe that that's a realistic possibility. The other thing I wanted to bring up, too, because I did in particular notice something about your piece that you put up yesterday regarding Charlottesville. You're misrepresenting what happened in Charlottesville, because the violence that was precipitated in Charlottesville only happened because Michael Signer, the Charlottesville mayor, who wanted to set up Charlottesville as a resistance city to the president, had his police walk the two opposing groups together and then told them to stand down. And the other element of Charlottesville as well is that it was funded leftist agitators. They showed up on Saturday. They caused the commotion. On Friday, when that weekend started and the original protests began, and it was just, the anti, take down the statue protesters there wasn't any violence. It was only when the left showed up.
So let me get this straight, Julio.
started.
You're celebrating a bunch of white guys walking down the street with tiki torches chanting, blacks will not replace us, you will not replace us, Jews will not replace us. You're celebrating that?
Listen, I'm not celebrating it, but they went through the proper, appropriate legal channels to go ahead and legally obtain a permit to protest.
I'm sorry,
So
there was no
difference.
permit granted to run down Heather Heyer with a car.
No, they're absolutely.
And that's what I
isn't.
was talking
But
about. And the point that I made about that is that if you Google Heather Heyer's name along with the word libtard, did you try that? You get all these neo-Nazi sites calling her.
One thing I haven't Googled.
You get all these, right up at the very top of all the hits, you get all these neo-Nazi sites calling her a fat pig, and she was paid by George Soros, and she's probably Jewish. And just all this just vile hatred coming out from your side. And I don't get why anybody would defend that.
You can't sit there and you can't marry the Daily Stormer and the neo-Nazi movement and white supremacy to American conservatism.
Then why have all those groups endorsed Donald Trump?
You know what? I don't know. I don't know.
Of course you know, Julio.
By leftist elements. Look at the guy that's running in Illinois that we've talked about. That's an actual white supremacist or whoever he was that's running in the congressional race in Illinois. The state GOP is not backing his race, but he decided to declare himself a Republican.
What does that have to do? You're making my point here, Julio. Of course a racist is going to declare himself a Republican. You think he's going to declare himself a Democrat? The Democrats left behind racism in 1965.
The Democrats were the party that fought for racism and Jim Crow laws, and the party that filibustered the 1964 Civil Rights Act for almost 2 months. That wasn't the Republicans that did it. It was the Democrats.
That's what I just said. The Democratic Party set aside racism in 1965 when Lyndon Johnson told Bill Moyers, if I sign this piece of
memo in the 90s when he was a senator in the leadership position under Clinton.
When LBJ signed the Civil Rights Act and told Bill Moyers in his office, when I sign this thing, the Democratic Party is going to lose the South for a generation. Well, it's been 2 generations, arguably 3 generations since then. But LBJ was right.
What's voting Democrat for 200 years. But that's another story.
Yeah, the Democratic Party from the founding of the Republic, up until the 1960s, had been the party that first defended slavery and later defended Jim Crow. You're right. The Republicans joined them, by the way, in defending Jim Crow in the 1870s. After Thaddeus Stevens, the radical Republican, was trashed, and the other radical Republican, Abraham Lincoln, was murdered. But so we've had both parties were complicit in this right up till 65.
You always like to cite facts. You like to cite your facts in historical perspective. Who was the only legislator that actually switched parties? There was only one, Strom Thurmond. You give me another example of Democrats turning to the Republican Party.
Why would any Democrat become a Republican, Julio? I mean, Strom Thurmond did because I said, why would any Democrat become a Republican? Strom Thurmond did because he was a racist. He was openly a racist.
Switched, and that the Democrats are now today's Republicans, and that's why.
No, I didn't say the Democrats are today's Republicans. I said the Republicans supported Jim Crow laws too. Both parties were racist up until 1965 when the Democrats repudiated it. The Republicans have yet to do that.
So what are you saying? You think the Republicans go ahead and agree that racism is okay?
I have not heard. I have not heard anybody repudiate. Well, yeah, okay.
I don't think that they need to. I mean, oh God.
Right. Okay. So you think it's just self-evident?
We're not racist. Okay.
All right. Julio Rivera, not racist. And I believe you're not racist, Julio. I believe that of you. ReactionaryTimes.com is his website. You can tweet him at it's Julio. Julio, thanks for dropping by.
Thank you so much for having me, as always, Tom.
Yeah. Talk to you soon. Thank you. We'll be back.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Okay, right after we come back, we're going to do a poll, and the question I'm going to ask you is, will impeachment of Trump hurt or help the Democrats? Stick around. And welcome back. And let's see here. Jesse, watching Free Speech TV in Miami. Hey, Jesse, what's on your mind?
Hey, hi, Tom. Hey, you question about authoritarianism with, politics. I like to put that question to the rich.
I'm sorry, say that again, Jesse?
I would like to put that question of authority to the rich.
Of authoritarianism or authority?
Yeah, the question of a politician, dictatorship to the rich. They really pretty much the real dictators. So how would they answer? What's your opinion of absolute power corrupting absolutely?
Oh, I think I agree with that old saying or biblical verse or whatever it is. I don't recall where it came from, but I think that, and that's the problem that we're seeing as Trump gets more and more familiar with the White House and learns. At first he was just learning what his limitations are. Now he's learning what his powers are, and he's got people all around him who are telling him what his powers are and helping him figure out what his powers are, and that I think is a really dangerous thing. I mean, that's my concern, Jesse.
Yeah, you speak for the world. But the thing is, we could question that authority, but where does he get it from? He's not getting it from the Constitution. So he must assume that, he has the absolute power. What he said, hearing about the Chinese being president for life. He said, I would like to do that. Right. Even George W. Bush said he would like to be president for life. But if you look at the capitalist system, they are presidents for life already.
How so?
They don't need no vote for their position. They got the money voting for them.
Well, yeah, this is what you're identifying, Jesse, is what Jimmy Carter was talking about on this show a couple of years ago, that the United States is no longer a democracy. It's become an oligarchy. It's the oligarchs, the billionaires are pulling the strings and calling the shots and increasingly owning the media. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry, too. Can I question you on that fascism and oligarchy?
Yeah, go for it.
I like fascism better because people know where that's coming from, and that goes back to the original question about absolute power, because it's not a dime's worth of difference between them. So most people know what happened with World War II. And, the birth of that being the Great Depression. So when people hear of fascism, they know exactly where that's coming from. That's absolute power. So if you If we could identify these people that Warren Buffett said not all good rich people, not all rich people believes in equality,
Right.
I think people have a better idea where they stand and what they need to do.
I think that's happening. I agree, and it's a good thing. I mean, it's this morning I flipped on MSNBC for a few minutes, and I'm kind of lukewarm about their middle of the road politics, but I think it was Stephanie Ruhle came out and said, the president lied a bunch of times last night, and I'm going to call him lies. I mean, the media is starting to actually talk like that, which I think is a good thing. Jesse, thank you for the call. It's always nice to hear from you, and I appreciate you listening to us or watching us there on Free Speech TV in Miami. We'll be right back. We're going to do this survey next. I'm just going to take a yes or no. If the Democrats try to impeach Trump, will it help them or hurt them? We'll be right back. And Nancy Pelosi saying if the Democrats try to impeach Trump with things as they stand right now, in other words, we don't have obvious and clear evidence of crimes, and the Republicans are pretty much united in their opposition to this idea. She says if we try to impeach Trump right now, it'll backfire on us, just like the Republicans' effort to impeach Clinton backfired on them back in '97, and we shouldn't do it. So no, don't try to impeach. It'll hurt the Democratic Party. On the other hand, you got Tom Steyer, who is spending his millions and saying clearly and unambiguously, you have to at least try to impeach him in order to inform the American public of his crimes. That this is not just, consensual sex in the back room of the White House. This is serious stuff that the American people will be horrified by. And the process itself will help the Democratic Party. So I'm going to unlock the phone lines right now. And our telephone number is 202-808-9925. Give us a call, and when I put you on the air, I'm just going to say your area code. And we're not screening these calls. And so so you've got like 10 seconds to say yes or no, and maybe a sentence of why you say yes or no. So starting with area code 312, you're on the air. 312?
Did you say?
Yeah, that's you.
312?
Yep.
Okay.
You're on the air.
No, it will not help the Democrats. If the Democrats really want to be progressive, they will go each into their district and give the information directly to the people.
Okay. Okay. Carol, thank you. Excuse me. Whoops. Area code 682. You're on the air. Yes or no? Impeach, yes or no? When I put
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So you're in favor of the impeachment. Thank you. When I put you on the air, you'll hear a whoosh noise. I may have your area code wrong. Sometimes our caller ID doesn't work as well as it should. Area code 573. Your answer. Yes or no? You're on the air. Okay. Let's try area code 941. You're on the air. Yes or no? I think I'm getting area codes wrong, but when you're on the air on line 6.
719.
Oh, you're in the 719 area code. Okay, my numbers are all screwed up. So when you hear the whoosh, you're on the air. What? Yes or no?
Okay, yeah. I think yes, and just for the reason Steyer's saying is Americans only have a 90-day memory.
Okay, thank you. This shows as area code 505. What? Yes or no? Obviously, this thing is scrambling area codes.
Okay, 308.
Okay.
And no.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, you're on the air. Yes or no?
I agree with Tom Steyer.
Okay, impeach. Okay, thank you. You're on the air. Yes or no? Impeach or not?
No, 60101.
Okay, no, thank you. You're on the air. Impeach, yes or no?
Yes, because Tom Steyer, I believe in his recommendation, and comparing the Clinton impeachment to this one is like apples and oranges.
Okay, thank you. You're on the air. Yes or no? Impeach or not?
Yes, but not because it'll help the Democrats, but because it's the right thing to do.
Okay, thank you. Eric, it shows area code 573. It could be anything. Yes or no? Should it impeach or not?
No, and no impeachment.
Okay. All right, thank you. You're on the air. Impeach or no?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. You're on the air. Impeach or not?
No.
Okay, thank you. I'm showing 817. You're on the air. Impeach or not?
Will hurt the Democrats in the short term, will help America in the long term.
So you're a yes.
Well, I guess so.
Okay, thank
Too
you.
bad they weren't Republicans. They'd have plenty of media, and then the truth would get out.
Yeah, you're right. Thank you. You're on the air. I'm showing area code 208, but I'm showing area code 270, but it could be wrong. You're on the air.
Yes, impeach. Definitely impeach. And that's all I have to say.
Okay, thank you. I'm showing area code 361. You're on the air.
No.
No?
We need to reunite our country.
Okay, thank you very much. You're on the air. Yes or no? Impeach or not? Okay, you're on the air. Hello?
Impeach.
Okay, thank you very much. You're on the air. Impeach or not?
No, not yet. Not until we have a majority.
Okay, thank you. You're on the air. Impeach or not?
No, because of a civil war.
Okay, thank you. You're on the air. Impeach or not?
No, wait for Mueller, let the law kick in, and then impeach later.
So do it if there's a consensus, a bipartisan consensus, basically.
Do it when Mueller brings up the legal things that they've run into, and it'll be the proof we need.
Okay, thank you. You're on the air. Impeach, yes or no?
Impeach, yes.
Okay, thank you. You're on the air. Impeach, yes or no?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, thank you. You're on the air. Impeach, yes or no? Hello?
Definitely, yes.
Definitely. Yes, okay, thank you. You're on the air. Impeach, yes or no?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Yep, you're on the air. Impeach, yes or no?
Yes. Let Mueller come up with the evidence.
Okay. You're on the air. Impeach, yes or no?
Yeah, impeach.
Okay, thank you. All right. We'll tally up our votes, and I'll share my opinion with you when we come back from this break. Stick around. It's 27 and a half minutes past the hour.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
It's your media support group for We the People, the Thom Hartmann Program. We'll be right back. It's the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from The Undercommons, Fugitive Planning and Black Study by Stefano Harney and Fred Moten. This is from the introduction. It starts with love, exchange, fellowship. It ends as it begins, in motion, in between various modes of being and belonging, and on the way to new economies of giving, taking, being with and for. And it ends with a ride in a Buick Skylark on a way to another place altogether. Surprising, perhaps, after we have engaged dispossession, debt, dislocation, and violence, but not surprising when you have understood that the projects of fugitive planning and black study are mostly about reaching out to find connection. They are about making common cause with the brokenness of being, a brokenness, I would venture to say, that is also blackness, that remains blackness, and will, despite all, remain broken, because this book is not a prescription for repair. If we do not seek to fix what has been broken, then what? How do we resolve to live with brokenness, with being broke, which is also what Moten and Harney called debt? Well, given that debt is sometimes a history of giving, at other times a history of taking, at all times a history of capitalism, and given that debt also signifies a promise of ownership but never delivers on that promise, we have to understand that debt is something that cannot be paid off. Debt, as Harney puts it, presumes a kind of individualized realization to a naturalized economy that is predicated upon exploitation. Can we have, he asks, another sense of what is owed that does not presume a nexus of activities like recognition and acknowledgement, payment and gratitude? Can debt become a principle of elaboration? Moten thinks Moten links economic debt to the brokenness of being in the interview with Stefan Shukatas, who he acknowledges that some debts should be paid and that much is owed, especially to black people, by white people. And yet, he says, I also know that it is, that what it is that is supposed to be repaired is irreparable. It can't be repaired. The only thing we can do is tear this stuff down completely and build something new, end of quote. The undercommons do not come to pay their debts, to repair what has been broken, to fix what has been undone. If you want to know what the undercommons wants, what Moten and Harney want, what black people, indigenous people, queers, and poor people want, what we, the we who cohabit in the space of the undercommons want, it is this. We cannot be satisfied with the recognition and acknowledgement generated by the very system that denies A, that anything was ever broken, and B, that we deserve to be the broken part. So we refuse to ask for recognition, and instead we want to take apart, dismantle, tear down that structure right now. That right now limits our ability to find each other, to see beyond it, and to access the places that we know live outside its walls. We cannot say what new structures will replace the ones we live with yet, because once we have torn stuff down, we will inevitably see more and see differently and feel a new sense of wanting and being and becoming. What we want after the break will be different from what we think we want before the break, and both are necessarily different from the desires that issue from being in the dark. Let's come at this by another path. In the melancholic and visionary 2009 film version of Maurice Sendak's Where the Wild Things Are, 1963, Max, the small seeker who leaves his room, his home, his family to find the world beyond, finds a world of lost and lonely beasts, and they promptly make him their king. Max is the first king the wild things have had, whom they did not eat, and who did not, in turn, try to eat them. And the beasts are the first grown things that Max has met, who want his opinion, his judgment, and his rule. Max's power is that he is small while they are big. He promises the beasts that he has no plans to eat them, and that this is more than anyone has ever promised them. He promises them that he will find ways through and around and will slip through the cracks and re-crack the cracks if they fill up. He promises to keep sadness at bay and to make the world with the wild creatures that roared their terrible roars and gnashed their terrible teeth and rolled their terrible eyes and showed their terrible claws. That Max fails to make the wild things happy or to save them or to make the world with them is less important than the fact that he found them and he recognized in them the end of something and potentially the path to an alternative in his world, or an alternative to his world, excuse me. The wild things were not the utopian creatures of fairy tales. They were the rejected and lost subjects of the world Max had left behind. And because he shuttles between the Oedipal land where his mother rules and the ruined world of the wild, he knows the parameters of the real. He sees what is included and what is left out. And he is now able to set sail for another place, a place that is neither the home he left nor the home to which he wants to return. Moten and Harney want to gesture to another place, a wild place that is not simply the leftover space that limbs real and regulated zones of polite society. Rather, it is a wild place that continuously produces its own unregulated wilderness. The zone we enter through Moten and Harney is ongoing and exists in the present, and as Harney puts it, some kind of demand is already being enacted, fulfilled in the call itself. While describing the riots of London in 2011, Harney suggests that the riots and insurrections do not separate out the request, the demand, and the call. Rather, they enact the one in the other. The book is The Undercommons, Fugitive Planning and Black Study. And welcome back. It's our geeky science hit here. Yep, there you go, our geeky science music. Our geeky science for today is about pharmaceuticals, specifically Ambien. Roseanne Barr, after her wild racist tweet, comes out and says, well, you know, I was Ambien tweeting. And the manufacturer of Ambien, which is a sleepy pill, Sanofi tweets this morning. It was this morning. This is hysterical. People of all races, religions, and nationalities work at Sanofi every day to improve the lives of people all around the world. And while all pharmaceutical treatments have side effects, racism is not a known side effect of any Sanofi medication. Meanwhile, Roseanne is, a couple of her cast members and colleagues, specifically Sarah Gilbert and Michael Fishman, have tweeted, things like, horrified by, well, Sarah said Roseanne's comments about Valerie Jarrett and so much more are abhorrent and don't reflect the beliefs of the cast or crew. And Roseanne Barr tweets, wow, unreal. I mean, she's sticking with it. It's bizarre. And just FYI, the woman who is now the head of ABC Entertainment, Channing Dungey, is an African-American woman who just fired Roseanne Barr. So I think that's great. Okay, our poll. We had 14 votes yes, impeach. We had 10 votes no, don't impeach. Here's my take on it. I agree with Nancy Pelosi with a qualification. The assumption that what Pelosi was saying was that if we rush into impeachment, let's say the Democrats take the House, so they literally could impeach Trump. It would then go to the Senate, where he almost certainly would not be convicted because it requires 2/3 of the Senate. But let's say the House votes to impeach. That if the Republicans are still defending Trump, it's going to blow up in our faces, just like the Democrats held tight with Bill Clinton all through that impeachment, and that's why it blew up in the Republicans' faces. The caveat is, if Mueller comes out with clear, unambiguous evidence of real crimes and corruption that Republicans can look at and say, oh my God, this guy really is a crook, just like they did in 73 or 74, whichever year it was that Nixon I guess it was 73 that he finally resigned. Just as they did with Nixon. I mean, if you can get the Republicans to say, oh my God, then, of course, go ahead with the impeachment. So, that's my thoughts on that. George in Chicago. Hey, George, thanks for listening to WCPT. What's on your mind today?
Well, your guest earlier, the guy from Reactionary Times.
Julio Rivera.
I believe that he said that Strom Thurmond was like the only Democrat that became a Republican. I guess he forgot about Ronald Reagan. And, Governor John Connally of Texas became a Republican when he became Nixon's Treasury Secretary, and he ran as a Republican in '76 for the presidential nomination, garnering only one delegate vote. And then there's Senator Richard Shelby of Alabama, Bill Graham of Texas, the 2 days ago resigned former governor of Missouri, the sexual pervert, was a Democrat who became Republican, as was the guy that Al Franken defeated for the Senate in Minnesota. And that's only the tip of the iceberg, because there's tens of millions of Americans who were raised in working-class households who have been voting against their own interests as Republicans when they were Democrats or should be Democrats. I mean, this is a societal shift. It's been going on for 50 years.
Yeah, the thing that concerns me is that there's also a societal shift happening on the right. You're seeing money flooding into right-wing organizations, like the Mercers, the billionaire Mercers funding or helping to fund Breitbart, nakedly racist publications, getting enormous support from these hard right funders. And, frankly, the Republican Party has been using racism as a tool ever since Nixon. And ever since the Democrats, in '65 said we're no longer the party of the racists, the Republicans have said, we're still the party of the racists, and we're going to go with this. And this is why the Roseanne issue has become partisan, which is just totally bizarre. I mean, it's just totally bizarre.
One other little point, Tom. The woman you were talking about earlier who's running for the Senate, her last name is pronounced Coburn.
Okay.
And I believe she's the wife of Alexander Coburn. And she's currently being pilloried for being an anti-Zionist and anti-Semitic based on writings she did 25 or 30 years ago.
Oh, my. Well, let's hope that a Democrat can pick up that seat. George, thank you for the call. Anita in San Antonio. Hey, Anita, what's up?
Yeah, I don't think we should be looking at impeachment politically and how it affects Democrats. It's bigger than that.
Well, but impeachment is not a legal process. It's a purely political process. So how can you not put it in a political frame?
Well, because it is not. It's about what he's doing to this country.
Right.
We have to remember that. It doesn't. It's not about whether it's legal or illegal. It's what he's doing to this country. He's tearing us apart.
Well, no, it has to be. There has to be a dimension of at least a patina of legality there, because the Constitution says high crimes. He may only be impeached, or he or she may only be impeached for high crimes or misdemeanors against the United States.
Okay.
So
and I don't.
Go ahead.
Yeah, but you don't think that he has committed high crimes or misdemeanors?
I absolutely think he has, but the Republican Party so far does not agree. I mean, everything that he has done so far that I would call a high crime, well, you know,
it doesn't matter what the Republicans think.
But if, for example, we could prove, if Mueller could prove that Trump helped out TMZ, I think, or whatever the name of that company is, that Chinese cell phone manufacturer that the Pentagon has banned because their phones can be used to spy on American citizens. If Trump is undoing that ban because the Chinese gave $500 million to a hotel with his name on it in Indonesia, or because the Chinese gave 34 trademarks to his daughter, which are going to represent probably hundreds of millions of dollars of profit to her and her husband, if we could prove that he did that, I think probably Republicans, well, even then, I'm not sure Republicans would say impeach the guy.
Well, I'm not sure they're going to either. And I'm not sure, even if the Democrats take the House, whether he'll be convicted in the Senate. But that, I think, is beside the point. He is destroying this country. And even James Clapper said he was put there. He's illegitimate. He needs to be taken out of office. Or we need to stand our ground. We need to stand up for what's right.
Yeah, I agree, Anita. And I think that the simple political reality is, if you can't convince at least a handful, at least a measurable symbolic quantity of Republicans that the crimes Trump has committed are worthy of removing him from office, it ain't going to happen.
Well, it's not about
and it's going to help the Republicans.
It's about
and then in the next election, you get more Republicans in the House and Senate, making life miserable for all of us. And Trump has even more power.
But if we convince, we need to sell this to the American people. We need to let them know. Every time a Democrat goes up to a microphone, they should be talking about this. They should be talking about the things that he's doing, the crimes that he's committed. They should be talking about the fact that he's illegitimate every single time they go to a microphone. And we need to convince the American people, because the Republican Party, the people, the elected Republicans, are not going to vote for impeachment until their constituents want impeachment. Yeah. Or until their constituents are okay with it. That's what this is all about.
I'm with you, and I understand. Anita, thank you for the call. Eric in Red Bank, New Jersey. Your thoughts, Eric?
Tom, just about regarding impeachment, I think the evidence most likely is there. I obviously don't know, but I think the Democrats have no choice. Forget the Republicans, because it's the morally correct thing to do. And who was it who said what's morally correct is politically correct, or something of that nature?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, but see, in order to do that, there has to be a consensus about what's moral. And on the Republican side right now, robbing working class people, stealing their pensions, cutting their wages, all that kind of stuff, destroying their right to have a union, that's just fine. That's entirely moral from their point of view. And using that money to enrich the top 1% from the Republican point of view, that's a fine thing. That's not a breach of morality. So what's the breach of morality that the Republicans would agree with us on, Eric?
I don't think the Republicans have no morals. We can't worry about them. We have to get the facts out to the American people.
Okay.
Forget the Republicans.
Yeah. Okay. We'll see where it goes. Thank you for the call. Helen in Ithaca, New York, listening on WRSI. Hey, Helen, what's up?
Hi, good morning. I wanted to tie together the two issues of impeachment and people turning from Democrats to Republicans.
Mm-hmm.
And the issue is Mike Pence. So impeachment, if we impeach Trump, we're going to be stuck with Mike Pence.
Maybe. I mean, it may Mike Pence, keep in mind, was in charge of the transition, right?
So we can impeach both of them, hopefully.
It sure does look like there were serious crimes committed during that transition.
But also, Mike Pence, he has one grandfather who's born in Ireland. I have grandparents born in Ireland, too. So he was raised Irish Catholic Democrat, and he became a freako, born-again Christian fanatic Republican, and, so he's one of those, you were talking about people switching. He's one of those people that switched.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, good point, Helen. Helen, thank you for the call. Thanks for listening to WRSI. We'll be back. Louise and I are going to go take a class on NLP, by the way, down in Orlando in July. And they're not a sponsor or anything. It's just a really cool thing. We're going to do our show from there. So I'll give you the details on that when we come back from the break. Stick around. It's about 15 minutes before the hour.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
We'll be back with more of the news of the day and your calls right after this. And welcome back. John in Vernon Hills, Illinois. Hey, John, what's on your mind today? Thanks for watching Free Speech TV.
Well, hey, Tom, good to speak with you again. I just want to make a statement and ask a question.
Okay.
First, the question, how do you keep your cool so well with people that you have on that are way out of it, like that one guest that insists that he's not racist? I consider racism similar to alcoholism. The first thing you have to do is admit you're alcoholic to try to attempt to recover. And I believe racism is the same issue, sir.
I think you're right. I think you're absolutely. Was that your statement or your question, John?
The question is, the statement is basically, I refuse to use the last name for this so-called leader because this is not a card game. It's not bridge nor euchre. So I use Kim Jong-un's name, dotard, which the definition is senile narcissist.
I understand. Yeah. I call him President Spanky, because he wanted Stormy Daniels to spank him his bare butt with that copy of Forbes magazine. I mean, just the image that brings to mind is so bizarre that I think President Spanky is a great title for him. But in answer to your question about how do I keep my cool debating people like Julio, John, I have to break this to you. The world is flat. It's not round. It's absolutely flat.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So see, when you're debating, when you're absolutely certain of your reality, and you know that the world is round, and somebody comes along and says, "Let's have a serious debate about this. The world is flat." Like you just laughed. I mean, the response is not to go crazy or think that, oh my God, or I can't let him say that, or that kind of thing. The response has got to just be, no, I'm right, and I know I'm right, and here are the facts. And then it's not at all difficult to debate people.
I hear you.
So that's the secret to my success, as it were. John, I want to move along and get another caller in. Thanks for the call. Joshua, watching Free Speech TV in Saginaw, Michigan. Hey, Joshua, what's up?
Hi, Tom. I'd like to make a statement to all the people listening to your show and program around the world. We know that 1 + 1 = 2. So, and we can go by the variables and look at things differently, but we know that the Russians interfered in the American election. Now, we can't quantify the results of that interference and say that this amount of people were swayed or that amount of people were swayed.
Well, and increasingly we're finding it may not have just been the Russians. It might have been the Russians, it might have been the Emiratis, it might have been the Saudis, and it might have been Israelis.
Exactly. And that's the point I was going to make. So if you have clear rules of the road that every campaign is to follow, and the rules were not followed, and you have people implicit clearly by the investigation by Robert Mueller, how can we say there was a fair election? I mean, The noble thing would be to have a new
Well,
election.
just one of the things I pointed out in my article for Alternate, if Michigan had gone for Hillary Clinton, she'd be president right now. And Donald Trump won Michigan by 10,500 votes. Over 75,000 ballots in New York City showed people stood in line for in Detroit, showed people stood in line for hour after hour after hour to vote for their local officials, for judges, for state legislators, for senators, federal senators and Congress people. But 75,000 of them chose not to vote for president. African Americans in Detroit. And, according to the voting machines. That in and of itself, in my opinion, should have changed the election. Joshua, thank you for the call. I'm spot on. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. I'm not going to be plugging this a whole lot, but again, these folks are not advertisers. This is just I've known John Lavelle and Richard Bandler for years and years. Richard Bandler was my trainer I'm a licensed by the Society of NLP. I'm a licensed NLP trainer, and Louise and I are both licensed NLP practitioners. And there is NLP is neuro-linguistic programming, and if you know about it and you know who Richard Bandler is, then your ears probably perked up. July 7th through the 15th in Orlando, the Society of NLP, the website is purenlp.com, purenlp.com. The Society of NLP is presenting a week-long training. There's two trainings. One's a licensed NLP practitioner. The other's licensed NLP master practitioner. And Louise and I will be there for the whole week, and we'll be doing our show at least several days live from there. And so just FYI, it's going to be a lot of fun. We're going because we learn. We want to learn more. We want to improve our skills, and these are skills and tools that can be used in a political context as well. So just FYI, the website is purenlp, purenlp.com. If you'd like to come and hang out, although come for the NLP, not for Louise and me, because we're going to be studying and whatnot. So to your calls, Bob in Roanoke, Virginia. Hey, Bob, what's up?
Hey, Tom, how are you?
I'm well. What's on your mind?
Control of the Congress is the answer, and I think that, therefore, impeachment or any of the other things that need to happen can happen.
Yeah. Well, and the Republicans controlled the House when Clinton was impeached. I don't recall if they controlled the Senate or not, but they still, it takes 2/3 in the Senate to sustain a conviction. So that's a really, really, really high bar.
Didn't control. The Democrats did control the Senate.
Yeah, but it's just So we'll see. I mean,
the Democrats can control the narrative. They can control the committees, and when those things happen, then the damage that this man is doing can begin to be undone. And I think that they've got to start there. And impeachment is a logical part of that process in the House. Whether or not he gets convicted in the Senate, that's a whole nother matter. But at least they can reverse what's going on. Start the reversal. I think that's the key.
Yeah, if the Democrats actually control, if they have a majority in the House, then they can control committee seats. They can issue subpoenas. They can force people to testify. Like the Republicans right now, when people come and testify about, Trump-Russia stuff, the Republicans invariably say, "Oh, you don't have to testify. It's no big deal." And the Democrats are helpless. They can't because they can't issue a subpoena without Republicans helping them. David in Woodland Hills, California. Hey, David, what's on your mind?
I would like to briefly explain Roseanne and the impeachment from an astrological point of view because they both tie together.
Okay. Quickly, please.
This is the year of the dog. Dog is anxiety and loyalty, so we will all feel that all year. Trump is a dog. He feels it all the time, but it should be his year. Roseanne is a dragon. I'm a dragon. This is the dragon's opposite bad year. It's bad for us, good for Trump. I've had my wallet stolen, my car towed, and I had to pay $5,000 for one single tooth implant. So it's a bad year for me.
Yikes.
Next year is the year of the pig. Honesty, straight to the point. So we will all feel honest. We will all yearn for honesty. The negative among us will lie even more. But next year is the year to begin to publicly bring it all to light. Okay.
Well, David, from your lips to God's ears. Let's hope it's true. David, thank you for the call, and thanks for listening to Sirius XM. Susan in Brunswick, Georgia. Hey, Susan.
Hey, Tom. I just wanted to make a quick point. I believe that the Republicans will never, ever go against Trump, no matter what, because they finally got their patsy in the White House that will sign all that lousy legislation that they've been wanting to pass for a very long time. And then my other point is I also feel that if they do go against Trump, then Trump will get on TV and he will call out the Republican Party for what they really are and what they're trying to do to this country.
Which will enhance his popularity. I mean, his wars with Jeff Flake and Bob Corker and John McCain actually help him with his base. It causes them to think that, he's not just a partisan. And I think you're absolutely right. Susan, thank you for the call. Kathy in Avondale, Arizona. Hey, Kathy.
Hello, Tom. How are you?
I'm fine. Your thoughts?
Okay. Well, my thoughts are that watching the primaries with Trump, I find that the Republicans were very complicit in that because if they were really true Republicans, they would have never allowed Trump to run on their ticket.
Well, I think their process. Why? Why do you say that, Kathy? Because it seems to me like he's embodying, outside of the so-called free trade thing, which, the Republicans were always big fans of free trade, and in the Democratic Party there's a schism between the corporate Democrats and the progressives on the issue. So basically, Trump was taking the progressive Democratic position on trade, but on pretty much everything else, he's right down the line corporate Republican.
But I'm talking about his demeanor and things like that, A lot of times they would push back and say, he doesn't belong in this stature.
But listen to, back in 1980 when Lee Atwater was advising, who was, by the way, his boss was Paul Manafort. When Paul Manafort and Lee Atwater were advising the Reagan administration in 1980 in that election, I've played the clip many times on the show. I don't have time to go drag it out right now, but Lee Atwater said right up front, right out loud, back before the 60s, we could use the N-word all the time. And he used the N-word in this clip. And he says, but, with the 60s, we had to get a little more cautious. And so we started using phrases like forced busing as a way of talking about race. And then that became too obvious. And so then we started talking about economics and even tax cuts. He said, Republicans understand tax cuts and trickle-down economics are going to hurt black people worse than white people. And so we can use those words now. So, I think this has always been part of this party.
Well, I understand that part, but what I'm saying is because they let it out loud.
Yeah.
Where Kasich was trying to push back, but they silenced him.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. The fact that it is out in the open, that's interesting. Kathy, thanks for the call. We'll be back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
From New York, I'm Luke.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by X-Chair. the office chair. Xchairtom.com is the website, xchairthom.com. The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com. Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242 or visit tomsbeets.com. It's the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from Legacy of Secrecy, The Long Shadow of the JFK Assassination by Lamar Waldron and me. The assassination of President John F. Kennedy on November 22, 1963, triggered cover-ups by officials, this is from the introduction, by the way, that continue to negatively impact American politics, life, and foreign policy. Legacy of Secrecy details those cover-ups and hidden investigations, many for the first time, including the reasons they were carried out under such intense secrecy. Most were spawned by John and Robert Kennedy's top-secret 1963 plan to stage a coup against Fidel Castro, a plan so highly classified that it only started to be exposed in 2005 and is finally revealed in this book. Their own confessions now show that three mafia bosses, Carlos Marcello, Santo Trafficante, and Johnny Roselli, were behind JFK's assassination. They used parts of the secret coup plan to kill JFK in a way that forced Attorney General Robert Kennedy, President Lyndon B. Johnson, excuse me, FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover, and high CIA official Richard Helms to withhold critical information not only from the public and the press, but also from each other and sometimes their own investigators. It's important to keep in mind that JFK was murdered just a year after the tense nuclear standoff during the Cuban Missile Crisis. The main goals of U.S. officials were to prevent a nuclear confrontation with the Soviets and to protect JFK's ally high up in the Cuban government, Commander Juan Almeida, head of the Cuban Army in 1963, still listed as Cuba's #3 official today. While U.S. leaders have managed to prevent a confrontation with Russia and preserve a critical ally in the Cuban government, this limited the investigation into JFK's murder, allowing the three mafia chiefs and their associates to remain free. As a result, the long shadow of secrecy surrounding both JFK's murder and the coup plan set the stage for the murder of Martin Luther King, ultimately driving two presidents from office and bringing about the murders of 5 congressional witnesses in the mid-1970s. Legacy of Secrecy breaks excuse me, important new ground in key areas, detailing for the first time Louisiana Godfather Carlos Marcello's clear confession to ordering JFK's assassination. Marcello's criminal empire ranged from Dallas to Memphis, and previously secret files at the National Archives have shown that he made this confession in 1985 to an FBI informant ruled credible by a federal judge as part of a secret FBI undercover sting operation named Camtex. Exposed here for the first time, Camtex yielded Marcello's admission that he'd met Lee Harvey Oswald and set Jack Ruby up in business in Dallas. The operation also generated hundreds of hours of heretofore secret prison audio tapes of Marcello discussing his crimes, recorded using the FBI informant's bugged transistor radio. Yet the FBI and Justice Department withheld most of that information from the public and Congress for years until its revelation in this book. Carlos Marcello wasn't the only mob boss who confessed his involvement in JFK's murder to a trusted associate. Legacy also uncovers important new information about Marcello's partners in JFK's assassination, Tampa Godfather Santos Trafficante and Johnny Roselli, the Chicago Mafia's man in Las Vegas and Hollywood. Shortly before their deaths, both mobsters admitted their roles in JFK's murder to their attorneys. 2 of their associates with documented ties to the secret JFK Almeida coup plan likewise confessed. Using exclusive new information supported by FBI files apparently withheld from Congress, this book names 2 of the Georgia men who paid James Earl Ray to kill the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, white supremacist Joseph Miltier and Hugh R. Spake. Miltier, who had been involved in Marcello's murder of JFK, was part of a small clique of racists in Atlanta who used Marcello to broker the contract to murder Dr. King. We document James Earl Ray's ties to Marcello's heroin smuggling operation and long overlooked evidence in FBI files linking Ray to Marcello's associate, Johnny Roselli. Finally, this book explains why Ray, while fleeing to Canada the day after killing Dr. King in Memphis, made a 400-plus mile detour south to Atlanta, where he contacted Spake to get help from Miltier. In 1979, the last congressional committee to investigate the murders of JFK and Dr. King, the House Select Committee on Assassinations, concluded, quote, that Trafficante, like Marcello, had the motive, means, and opportunity to assassinate President Kennedy, end of quote from the congressional report. The HSCA had been created in the wake of Roselli's sensational murder, but the HSCA was unable to establish direct evidence of Marcello's complicity. And the same was true for Trafficante and Roselli, because the CIA, FBI, and other federal agencies withheld so many relevant files. The HSCA, headed by civil rights figure Louis Stokes, also concluded there was a likelihood of conspiracy in the assassination of Dr. King, and that financial gain was James Earl Ray's primary motivation. But they were unable to determine who had paid Ray or how the conspiracy had worked, because the FBI and other agencies had hid critical files. With the help of more than 24 associates of John and Robert Kennedy, backed up by thousands of recently released documents at the National Archives, many of which are quoted here for the first time, Legacy tells the full story denied to Congress and the American people, legacy of secrecy. Addiction. Hannah Arendt.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Last Thursday, I shared this with you briefly. I wanted to amplify on it today. We were talking about TV shows that are nice to binge watch over the holiday weekend. And, somebody recommended to us, by the way, in response to my pitching this story, Person of Interest, which Louise and I have started watching. And thank you for that recommendation. It was great. But this was from the show Taken. It's an NBC show. It's in its second season, I believe. And every episode, these guys have been fighting against big corporations, giant pharmaceutical companies, evil billionaires. And in this one little clip, the woman who is the boss is describing to one of the people who works for her, and the protagonist of this show, what they're up against in this particular episode. And it's something that she refers to as economic hitmen. Here is the clip.
Economic hitmen are hired to infiltrate developing countries and manipulate their governments in order to steal their natural resources.
Steal for whom?
Corporations. Big oil, big pharma. The hitmen, they go in and they convince local leaders to take out loans for construction or engineering projects necessary to harvest the natural resources. And then invariably, when those countries default on the loans, then the corporations move in and take everything.
Colonialism 2.0. It's crafty.
Fraud, rigged elections, extortion, sex, murder, whatever it takes. Economic hitmen are very well connected and not to be trifled with.
Well,
so there you go. So when I saw that, I thought, oh my God, it's our old buddy John Perkins. He's the author of 9 books. He's an economist, activist, author of 9 books, including Confessions of an Economic Hitman and the follow-up, The New Confessions of an Economic Hitman. His website is johnperkins.org. You can tweet him at economic_hitman. And John, welcome back to the program. It's been a while since we've talked. I hope all is well with you and yours.
Yes, Tom, thank you so much. It's great to be back with you. And I didn't realize that was on the show. That's really gratifying to hear, because I do hear that the word is getting out a lot more, that the truth is coming out.
Yeah, it's season 2, episode 10, if you want to track it down, and which was just like, a couple of weeks ago. And it's just, I just, economic hitman, oh, it's like, oh my God, this is John Perkins. So John, you brought this phrase into common usage with your book, Confessions of an Economic Hitman, your best-selling book. But it's been a while since we've had this conversation. I mean, not just you and me, but the country. And so could you recap for us exactly what is an economic hitman and what did you do in that role?
Well, I think it's fair to say that economic hitmen have really created the world's first truly global empire. It's really a corporate empire. And my job was to identify countries with resources our corporations want, like oil. And I had a staff of up to 50 people working with me to produce reports that would prove that if we made huge loans to those countries, if those countries accepted huge loans from the World Bank, the IMF, and other such organizations, their economies would grow because they would invest the money in infrastructure, power plants and industrial parks and things that would benefit the corporations that built those, which were our corporations, and a few wealthy people in the countries, the people who own the industries and the commercial establishments. But the majority of the people would suffer because money would be diverted from education, healthcare, and other social services to pay off the interest on the debt. And in the end, the debt wouldn't be paid off. The principal couldn't be paid off. So we'd go back and say, hey, look, you owe us money. So to pay off your debt, sell your oil or whatever the resource is real cheap to our corporations, privatize your public sector businesses like your utility companies, their water and sewer and such things, and sell them to our investors. Vote with us against Cuba or the next United Nations vote, or let us build a military base on your soil or whatever. So although the country went into debt tremendously, they never actually saw the money. The money went directly from a bank in Washington, D.C. or someplace that's in Houston to pay Brown and Root or some other company, a U.S. corporation, to make huge profits building these projects. And in the few cases where the leaders of the countries wouldn't accept this, and that came out on that TV clip, the people we called jackals would go in and either overthrow the governments or assassinate their leaders. Two of my clients that did not play the game, Jaime Roldos of Ecuador and Omar Torrijos of Panama, and they both died in what certain were assassinations.
Whoa. So, wow. And so the economic hitman doing what you're describing, this what some would simply describe as austerity politics or economics, they're operating on behalf of a country, on behalf of a particular corporation, or both?
In my day, we were what I would call generic. We wanted a U.S. corporation to get these big contracts, and we wanted to be part of it, of course, which we almost always were as a subcontractor or whatever, a consultant. But we didn't really care whether it went to Bechtel or Brown and Root or Stone and Webster. Today, those kinds of people are still out there, but now also every major corporation has its own private brand of economic hitman. And they're out trying to get those deals. They're out promoting their way, whether it's Walmart or Nike or Exxon or whoever. They're trying to get tax breaks from countries. They're pitting country against country to get better tax breaks, to get better labor relations situations, and so on and so forth. So the reason I wrote the new Confessions of an Economic Hitman about 12 years after the original was because things had actually gotten a lot worse. And in addition to all that, Tom, as you well know, we in the United States are being hit too, with huge amounts of debt, education debt, credit card debt, healthcare debt. And when you have large amounts of debt like that, whether you're an individual or a country, you're enslaved. You're really part of a system that you can't get out of, and you've got to play the game pretty much.
And that's where we're at right now. So what's the solution to this, John Perkins?
Well, I think the solution is for all of us to understand this and to understand that there are really two realities that guide the world. There's an objective reality, the microphones we're talking over right now, and there's a perceived reality, which are the words that we're speaking. And almost all of human activity is determined by perceived reality. There really are no countries, there's no religion, there's no culture, there are no corporations except as we perceive them. And when enough people accept a perception or codify it into law, it has a huge impact on objective reality. And the perceived reality, particularly after Milton Friedman won the Nobel Prize in Economics in 1976, it had been growing, but that really struck a nerve when he said the only responsibility of business is to maximize short-term shareholder profits, regardless of the social and environmental costs. And that opened the door for corporations, for CEOs to say, hey, I not only should, but I have a mandate to do whatever it takes to maximize profits regardless. And that includes corrupting politicians, destroying resources upon which my business depends ultimately, exploiting labor, exploiting resources, exploiting everything. And that's really led us to what I call a death economy, an economic system that's based to a large degree on warfare and also destroying the earth, and consuming the very resources upon which we depend. We need to change that perception and say, listen, the responsibility of business, of all of us, is to create an economic system that's a renewable resource. Yes, let's pay investors a decent rate of return, but let's invest our money into things that clean up pollution, regenerate destroyed environments, new technologies that don't dig the earth up, that don't require new digging up resources, that recycle and that use more of the sun and the air. It's a very exciting time. That's what I call a life economy. And it takes a change of perception. And that's really all it takes. And once you start changing that perception, then people take actions to move into that new perception. And throughout history, we've seen huge changes because of changes in perception. A classic one is when Copernicus told us that the sun doesn't revolve around the earth. That the earth revolves around the sun. That changed everything.
But there are more recent and there are more recent political realities. I mean, the acceptance of gay marriage, for example, how quickly that happened. Although there is backlash again, just like the civil rights in the '60s, and the backlash came. But it seems to me that we're moving that this country has always moved in a progressive direction. We do it in fits and starts, but we've always moved in that direction, and that Trump notwithstanding and corporate misbehavior notwithstanding. If we can make it through this, if we don't devolve into an autocratic form of government, and I've got a piece up on Alternet right now about my concerns about that. But if we can make it through this, then I think we have tremendous progressive upside here.
I totally agree. I think our shadow has come out. We're looking at our shadow. The rest of the world is seeing our shadow.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really, really good thing. It's tough to go through, and the court systems are going to suffer for a long time, and tax policy. There's a lot of suffering that's going to go on in this, but that's what happens. And if you light a match in a dark room, the darkness can't snuff out the match. And in fact, the darker the room is, the brighter the match is. And I think that's what we're doing now. What you're doing, what I'm trying to do, and what many, many people around the world are doing is we're lighting matches all over the world. We're piercing the darkness. And the darkness will not be able to snuff it out. I agree with you that human history is one of survival, it's one of flexibility, it's one of changing perceptions when we need to do that.
It's a great metaphor. John, we're out of time, but johnperkins.org is the website. The book, Confessions of an Economic Hitman, and the new Confessions of an Economic Hitman. You can tweet him at economic_hitman. John, thank you.
Thank you so much, Tom. Keep up your great work.
Great having you with us. We'll be right back.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
We'll be back with more of the news of the day and your calls right after this. And welcome back. Corky in Hilton, New York. Hey, Corky, thanks for watching Free Speech TV. What's on your mind today?
Hello, Tom. Yeah, I factor everything down to its lowest common denominator. For me, the economic hitman started back in the '60s. You probably remember the blockbusters?
You're talking when you say blockbusting, I'm thinking about people of color moving into white neighborhoods. Is that what you're talking about?
Yes, and then the real estate would go around to the white people in the neighborhood and say, look, you better sell your house now because property values are going down.
Oh, that's right. You're right. The real estate companies started playing games around that. Yeah, and then speculating and in some cases betting against neighborhoods and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, I'd forgotten about that. Thank you, Corky.
And then they'd go back in a couple of months and say, well, your property value just went down another 5,000, so you better sell to me now.
Right.
And this, they did.
Yeah, and this was, these were economic hitmen, homegrown and turning their sights on us ourselves. That's fascinating. Corky, thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it. Esther in Portland, Oregon. Hey, Esther, thanks for watching Free Speech TV. What's up?
Lord Acton, Lord John Acton, late half of the 18th century, of the 1800s, was the power corrupts absolutely, absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you
and
for that.
I'm delighted to be able to tell you something because you've told me so much.
Well, thank you very much. Who is Lord Acton, Esther?
Other than being a British lord, I would have to Google it or what?
I just said okay. Okay, I'll have to do the same. I'm now you've got my curiosity going. Esther, thank you very much for the call and for setting me straight on that. I appreciate it. It's nice to hear from you. Vita in Addison, Illinois. Vita or Vita?
Vita, yes.
Vita. Hey, Vita, what's up?
Thank you for taking my call, Tom. Regarding impeachment, I'm all for it because with due cause, with real cause, of course. Waiting for Mueller, to finish his investigation because he's a great, we need to trust on that.
Yeah.
But now looking back, what Pelosi said in 2008 did not help us very well. It did not help the nation. Unfortunately, you do have to look back. I mean, they took us to war based on a lie. They got away with it. And they were emboldened. Republicans got emboldened. So, they oppose everything Obama proposed, even if they were for it. And then they even deny us a judge, a Supreme Court judge. We cannot just let it get away with that because then it means the Democrats don't have a spine. The Republicans will do even worse next time. They had,
And you have to wonder, if Mitch McConnell held Merrick Garland's appointment up for almost an entire year, when all the polls and all the news and all conventional wisdom said Hillary Clinton was going to be president, if he held that up for almost a year in the faith and belief that a Republican was going to be in the White House, did he know something about those 75,000 voting machines in the African-American parts of Detroit that failed to record a single vote for president? Did Mitch McConnell know? And and I'm thinking he probably did, and that's a thought that chills me. I mean, it's just, Vita, thank you for the call. Very, very well said. I appreciate it. And thank you for watching Free Speech TV. It's 21 minutes and a half past the hour. We'll be right back. Welcome back. It's 22 minutes past the hour here on the Thom Hartmann Program, helping you win the water cooler wars. Donald Trump last night had a rally in Nashville, Tennessee. He was there to support Representative Marsha Blackburn, and he told a bunch of lies. I mean, just straight up, flat out lies. And to her credit, Stephanie Ruhle on MSNBC this morning said, these are lies. We're not going to call them falsehoods or untruths anymore. They're lies. He said, for example, that Democrats, and I quote, don't want the walls. They want open borders. They're more interested in taking care of criminals than they are in taking care of you. It's a simple lie. I mean, Democrats are not in favor of building more of a wall along the southern border, but that's just because it's a stupid idea. Most people who come into this country don't come across the Mexican border. They come in on a tourist visa. Something like 3 million people a year. And then they just stay out their visa. They get a 6-month visa, and after 6 months, they've just kind of vanished into the woodwork. And yeah, you've got a few people who are so poor they can't even get a visa or a passport in Mexico or Guatemala or whatever, or they don't want to raise the attention of the authorities, and so they end up on our border. But that is not something that a wall is going to prevent unless you turn us into Berlin. I mean, this is crazy. But, you know, to say that Democrats are more interested in taking care of criminals than they are in taking care of you, that's I mean, Huey Longism. It's even beyond that. That is the kind of talk that you hear from absolute autocrats. He went on to say, Democrats have opposed every common sense measure to stop this horrendous scourge of crime, to dismantle MS-13, and to stop illegal immigration. It's a flat-out lie. He referred to Nancy Pelosi as the MS-13 lover. A lie. He said, how do you like the fact that they had people infiltrating our campaign? Can you imagine people infiltrating our campaign? No, nobody infiltrated the Trump campaign, you know, unless it was Paul Manafort's, you know, Russian buddies. Nobody infiltrated that campaign. Certainly no FBI people did. But the president said this last night, and we have a history, a tradition in this country of believing what our president says. You know, respect the president and the presidency and the president. And now we've got a guy who is such a naked liar. I mean, literally 9 major lies in one speech last night. He told this whole, well, the Washington Post calls it or the New York Times calls it a richly embellished story, which is a way of saying a really whopper lie, that he saved us $1 billion with the embassy in Jerusalem. The problem is that, you know, we didn't open an embassy in Jerusalem from scratch. We took the consulate building, which is basically where most of the embassy functions were being done in Jerusalem, because it's the seat of government for Israel. We took that building and changed the sign out front. Instead of saying consular, it says embassy. And a few people moved from the embassy in Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, but that's it. But there's still going to be an embassy built in Jerusalem, and it's still going to cost a whole pile of money. And Donald Trump didn't negotiate a damn thing. He's just lying about this. He went on to say that African Americans have supported Democrats for over 100 years. Another lie. In my father's generation, many African Americans were Republicans. Lincoln freed the slaves. And the Republican Party took credit for that. Now, they abandoned that position in the 1870s, 1880s, but they took credit for it right up until, you know, up until 65. And then in 64 and 65, when the Civil Rights Acts were passed, the Voting Rights Acts were passed, then the Republicans could no longer claim to be the party of Lincoln. And African Americans started abandoning the Republican Party and going to the Democratic Party, depending on where they live, what part of the country. And so you've got this lie from Donald Trump. African Americans supported Democrats for over 100 years. This is a simple lie. He's got another lie. He says, in the end, Mexico's going to pay for the wall. They're going to pay for the wall, and they're going to enjoy it, okay? Which is how men used to badly joke about things like rape. I mean, that's pretty awful. And immediately, President Enrique Peña Nieto of Mexico tweeted at Trump, real Donald Trump, no, Mexico will never, in all caps, never pay for a wall. Not now, not ever. Sincerely, Mexico, parenthesis, all of us, close parenthesis. Is Trump just lying through his teeth? No president, well, I'll tell you this one after this break.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Actually, I can just do it. He says, no president has accomplished more than he has in the first year and a half. Another simple, bald-faced lie. Back with your calls after this. It's the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Our book today is Us Versus Them, The Failure of Globalism by Ian Bremmer. This is from Chapter 1, titled Winners and Losers. It's time for a local revolution, the candidate told the roaring crowd. Countries are no longer nations, but markets. Borders are erased. Everyone can come to our country, and this has cut our salaries and our social protections. This dilutes our cultural identity. Marine Le Pen's 4 sentences capture every important element of the anxiety rising across the Western world. The borders are open and the foreigners are coming. They'll steal your job. They will cost you your pension and your health care by bankrupting your system. They will pollute your culture. Some of them are killers. Le Pen fell short in her bid to become France's president in 2017, but her message remains compelling for the 21st century politics of us versus them. But this is not a story about Marine Le Pen or Donald J. Trump or any of the other populist powerhouses who have emerged in Europe and the United States in recent years. Spin the camera toward the furious crowd. There's the real story. It's not the messenger that drives this movement. It's the fears, often, if not always, justified, of ordinary people. Fears of lost jobs, surging waves of strangers, vanishing national identities, and the incomprehensible public violence associated with terrorism. It's the growing doubt among citizens that government can protect them, provide them with opportunities for a better life, and help them remain the masters of their fate. As of December 2015, just 6% of people in the United States, 4% in Germany, 4% in Britain, and 3% in France believe the world is getting better. The pessimistic majority suspects that those with power, money, and influence care more about their cosmopolitan world than they do about their fellow citizens. Many citizens of these countries now believe that globalization works for the favored few, but not for them. And they have a point. Globalization, the cross-border flow of ideas, information, money, people, goods, and services, has resulted in an interconnected world where national leaders have increasingly limited ability to protect the lives and livelihoods of their citizens. In the digital age, borders no longer mean what citizens think they mean. In some ways, they barely exist. Globalism, the belief that the interdependence that created globalization is a good thing, is indeed the ideology of the elite. Political leaders of the wealthy West have been globalism's biggest advocates, building a system that has propelled ideas, information, people, money, goods, and services across borders at a speed and on a scale without precedent in human history. Sure, more than 1 billion people have risen from poverty in recent decades, and economies and markets have come a long way from the financial crisis. But along with new opportunities come serious vulnerabilities, and the refusal of the global elite to acknowledge the downsides of the new interdependence confirms the suspicions of those losing their sense of security and standard of living that elites in New York and Paris have more in common with elites in Rome and San Francisco than with their discarded countrymen in Tulsa, Turin, Tuscaloosa, and Toulon. The globalists gutted the American working class and created a middle class in Asia, former White House strategist Steve Bannon told The Hollywood Reporter a few days after Donald Trump's 2016 election victory. The issue is now about Americans looking not to get effed over, end of quote. In the United States, the jobs that once lifted generations of Americans into the middle class and kept them there for life are vanishing. Crime and drug addiction are rising. While 87% of Chinese and 74% of Indians told pollsters in 2017 that they believe their country is moving in the right direction, only 43% of Americans said the same thing. In Europe, the European Commission and the unelected bureaucrats who enforce its rules have legislated for its 28 member nations without understanding their very needs. In recent years, they've failed to halt a debt crisis that has forced many Europeans to accept lower wages, higher prices, later retirement, less generous pensions, and an uncertain future, all while telling them that they must bail out foreign countries that have spent their way into debt. In the migrant crisis, globalist European leaders insisted that all EU members must accept Muslim refugees in numbers determined in Brussels, and barricades and a spike in nationalism were the result. I'm defining nationalism here as one form of us versus them intended to rally members of one nation against those of other nations. Were the wave of populist nationalism sweeping the United States of globalism's failure, it would be bad enough. But there's a larger crisis coming. Many of the storms creating turmoil in the U.S. and Europe, particularly technological change in the workplace, broader awareness of income inequality, are now headed across borders and into the developing world, where governments and institutions are not ready. Developing countries are especially vulnerable because the institutions that create stability in developing countries are not as sturdy, and social safety nets aren't nearly as strong as in the United States and the European Union. They face an even bigger gap between rich and poor, and the reality that new technologies will kill large numbers of jobs that lifted expectations for a better life will be much harder to manage. In short, just as the financial crisis had a cascading effect through financial markets and real economies around the world, so the sources of anger convulsing Europe and America will send shockwaves through dozens of other countries. Some will absorb these shocks, some of them won't. As poorer people in developing countries become more aware of what they're missing or losing, many will pick up rocks. The book, Us Versus Them by Ian Bremmer. Fair and only slightly unbalanced. Thom Hartmann here with you, the Thom Hartmann Program. The state of the art right now for reconstructing shredded documents is pretty amazing. There's two kinds of shredders. There's what are called straight-through shredders, and then there's what's called cross-cut shredders. And the straight-through shredders, you put a piece of paper into it, and 30 or 40 little tiny strips come out the other end, but they're long and continuous, right? We've seen these on TV. You've probably seen them in the office. The cross-cut shredders, you feed a piece of paper through, and it makes those vertical cuts, but it also makes horizontal cuts, so you get little tiny pieces of confetti. Now, the cross-cut ones are really, really hard to reassemble. But on the straight shredder ones, the ones that just do it like, you know, fingernails slicing through it or cat nails slicing right through it, in those cases, what you do if you're the FBI is you lay out, you take all these little, strips, you flip them all so that the side that has the printing on it is up and visible. You just randomly arrange them on the floor, take a giant picture of it, and then a computer reassembles all the strips. It looks for patterns. It uses pattern recognition. It's artificial intelligence software, and starts spitting out pages that are duplicates of what the original pages were. You don't even have to glue them together and paste them like they do in the movies. I mean, this is something, bang, a computer does it. And so two things in the Michael Cohen / Donald Trump investigation, the whole Trump-Russia thing. Number one is it certainly looks like things are, well, let's get to this first. Number one, one of the things that the FBI has notified, or that the prosecution or Mueller or whoever has notified, it's in the Cohen case, so I guess it would be the FBI, has notified the judge is coming, is a whole bunch of shredded documents. That when they raided Michael Cohen's office, he was in the process, apparently, of destroying evidence. And apparently he didn't have a cross-cut shredder, because they have reassembled these and they're going to introduce them into court, number one. And number two, out of 1,300,000 documents that the special master, the person who's supposed to look over Cohen's documents, these are not the shredded ones, these are the rest of them, as they're supposed to look over his documents and determine whether or not they constitute actual client-attorney privileged communication or whether they're just Michael Cohen being a bagman. Out of that 1,300,000 documents, 252, not 252,000, 252 documents were found to actually have to do with Michael Cohen practicing law and having a client. And probably it's Sean Hannity. 252 of them. But another 1.3 million, it's just fine. You guys can look at this. So Donald Trump has got to be shaking in his boots, not to mention Michael Cohen. Paul in La Mirada, California. Hey, Paul, what's on your mind today?
How you doing? I just want to say first that we're having our 17th Free Discussion Society on June the 10th, Sunday, in Fullerton, California, if anybody's around.
Okay, website?
freediscussionsociety.com.
Okay, cool.
And I've been thinking about this, and I'm sure somebody's written about it before in a brilliant way, but kind of the concept of blame in right-wing ideology. You kind of always see like the right-wing ideology focuses on someone to blame for everything and anything, and
other than self.
Of it. I'm sorry.
Other than self.
Yeah, exactly. And I got reminded of it. I think it was Trump's tweets recently talking about the migrant children, and he's blaming the Democrats.
Right.
And it's just this kind of ongoing tactic that is a part of right-wing ideology, just blame anybody for anything just to take the focus off of whatever you're doing.
Yeah. Well, and this is the story of Trump's life, by the way. I mean, he was doing this business back in the 80s. This is what insecure little boys do, is, who are afraid of punishment by dad because he's a lousy father. And that's that they lie compulsively to avoid that punishment, or punishment from mom for that matter. And I think that this guy, Donald Trump, is badly wounded. And I think, frankly, a lot of the people who love him are badly wounded, individuals. Paul, thanks for the call. Good point. Joe in Vail, Colorado. Hey, Joe, what's on your mind?
Well, I'm just calling about the impeachment, and I think they should definitely go ahead with impeachment of Donald Trump, because either one or two things are going to happen. We're either going to have a President Pence, which would be even better than Donald Trump, or we're going to have Donald Trump for 4 more years when it comes time for re-election in 2020.
Yeah, it's entirely possible. The third option, though, Joe, is the one that happened in 1997, I think the year was, and that is that the president gets impeached in the House. He does not get removed from office because, hitting 2/3 of the Senate is damn hard. And in fact, I'd say today it's impossible. And so A, he stays in office, and B, he's now empowered. Bill Clinton's popularity went up almost 20 points when he got impeached, nationwide.
Right. I agree with you 100%. That's why I think they should go ahead with impeachment.
Because it'll help him get reelected?
Yes.
And you think that's a good thing?
Absolutely a good thing, yes. It's maybe good for our country.
If Trump gets reelected?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, what, would you rather have a President Hillary Clinton? I mean,
actually, yeah. In a heartbeat, Joe, I would definitely rather have Hillary Clinton. Jerry in Chicago. Hey, Jerry, what's on your mind?
Hello, Tom. You were talking about impeachment, and an old quote came to mind from Napoleon Bonaparte.
Mm-hmm.
It was, never interrupt an enemy when he's making a mistake.
Right, yeah, and variations on that, I've heard many times, yeah.
But he's such a buffoon. I just think he's going to, take care of himself.
So you think that the Democrats should not impeach Trump because he's going to screw things up so badly it'll just be obvious? Well, that may well be. I mean, Herbert Hoover didn't get impeached, but his party was destroyed for 2 generations as a consequence of his presidency. So, that's a possibility too. Jerry, thank you. Joe in Cupertino, California. Hey, Joe.
Tom, I called to take part in your poll, but I'm glad I waited. Anyway, about a week from now, we're going to have a new governor out here in California. I'm really happy about that. And he's a great guy as it is, but midterms are in 5 months.
Who do you think is going to be the new governor?
I got to suspect Gavin's pretty much the progressive.
Gavin Newsom, yeah.
Lead, but he's been around for a bit, and I really enjoyed following him.
He's a good guy. He was, what was he, mayor of Oakland, San Francisco?
He was mayor of San Francisco.
That's right.
He was able to get the LGBT law passed in the city. I thought it was a good thing.
Yeah.
But you're right. I mean, I think, that Article 4 or Section 4 of the Constitution says 2/3, and that's pretty tough. But, I've been listening to Mr. Spires speaking now for almost, a year and a half?
Yeah.
He's right. I mean, and I think we have to stand by what's right, because right makes might. You can't just let this go unchecked. The books are going to suggest, my children are going to say, well, Dad, why'd you let this happen?
Right.
So whether we win or lose is important, but the history has to show. I'd rather see us wait for Mueller to come out, but, do we wait for the midterms? Like I say, that's 5 months from now. Who knows what's going to happen?
Yeah.
Anyway, last night was a disaster. I always had to turn off the TV. This is like watching Richard Nixon all over again. We're so aggravated at that speech in Tennessee. This guy's just going off the deep wells.
Was this speech being carried by the cable TV networks?
Yeah, I was watching. I turned to Fox because it wasn't on MSNBC, but I wanted to see what he had to say about this. But, Billy Graham Jr. is coming down my state. In California, we don't have that. I'm just amazed at what's going down.
He's hitting 34 cities in California, if I recall correctly. Billy Graham is doing a crusade. And I got something in the mail a day or two ago addressed to me at my new home here in Portland from the religious right. It was, we're trying to sign up Christian conservatives to make sure that they're voters. And it was a really sophisticated piece of direct mail marketing.
Yes. Now, my little girl goes to high school here, and I got a lot of H-1B visa students that go to school with her, and they're afraid they only get to stay in the country for 3 years, then they have to go, and then they come back for a total of 6. They start high school, but they can't finish. That's terrible.
Yeah.
I mean, what country is this that we educate people from other countries and then we kick them out? If we're on the path of here, we educate, don't you think we should keep them so we can at least take advantage of the education?
There you go. Yeah, it doesn't make sense. Joe, I want to get one more call in here before we hit this break. Larry in Whitestone, New York. Larry, you're on the air. Larry? Okay, let's try Barbara in Isle, Minnesota. Barbara, you are on the air.
Yes, this is concerning economic hitman.
Mm-hmm.
Foxconn was building a big corporation in Wisconsin.
Right.
Wants to take millions and millions of gallons of water out of Lake Superior. They want Wisconsin to get permission.
Yeah, was it Lake Superior or Lake Michigan, whichever. But yeah, you're absolutely out of the Great Lakes. Yeah, you wonder, what role economic hitmen played in that, because Scott Walker certainly, rolled over and said, "Oh, here's $1 billion. We'll pay you, almost $1 million a job to create a few jobs so I can brag about them." I think people in Wisconsin, I mean, you're from Minnesota, but I think people in Wisconsin are starting to see through Scott Walker, don't you, Barbara?
Well, I hope so.
Yeah, me too. Me too. Time will tell. Barbara, thank you so much for the call, and much appreciated. It's coming up on 45 minutes past the hour, 1:45. In about 4 minutes, we will check in with Talk Media News with Bob Ney and find out what's going on in the world today. And in the meantime, stick around. We'll be right back. 45 and a half minutes past the hour.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archive.
We'll be right back after the break. Stick around. And welcome back. Fred in Bremerton, Washington, listening on KBCS. Hey, Fred, what's up?
Good morning. Thank you for taking my call. Listen, I was going to talk about the impeachment thing and all the rest of that. I'm just going to say this to the public listening. His voice really grates on me. I don't like his voice. I don't like his tenor. I don't like his cadence. And, of course, I don't like his message. That's all I want to say about that.
Okay, his is Trump, I'm assuming.
Kalispel tribes up here in Northeast Washington are fighting Dow Corning because they have given permission. They were given permission by I forgot the county up there. I believe it's oh God, excuse me. I'm looking at the article right now. Anyway, Kalispel tribes fighting a company that's backed by Dow Corning that's going to put in a smelter to smelter silica that this British Columbia company has located up in B.C. They can't smelter it up there, so they want to bring it down to eastern Washington and create a smelter. According to this article in the Spokane Register, this company bought this 186 acres back in September. This company is called High Test Silicon, an Edmonton, Alberta company, excuse me. And they're expected the output from the smelter is 320,000 tons of carbon dioxide annually once this thing gets up and running.
Not to mention all the toxic metals and poisons associated with that. This is the exact same thing, Fred, that the Canadians are doing with and the Koch brothers with the Keystone XL pipeline. The whole point of that was to get that poisonous oil down into the southern part of the United States, where it could be refined and all the poisons would go into Cancer Alley downwind. And from one of the refineries that can do that kind of oil is owned by the Koch brothers, directly or indirectly. And then we get the poison, they get the money.
So I'm just asking your public that are listening to you, try to call the Kalispel Tribal Council. They're trying to do something about this because it's a done deal because the county had already sold them the land. So, it's a done deal. I don't understand it, but because of the tenor of our environment right now, it doesn't surprise me now that this stuff is happening.
Yeah, there you go. Thanks for the heads up on that, Fred. I appreciate it. Greg in Stellacom, Washington, watching us on Facebook Live. Hey, Greg, we got a minute to the break. What's up?
Hey, Tom, when I was in the University of Wisconsin, one of my professors told me in 1978 that we were going to have a corporate coup d'etat because the corporations would eventually take over. And now that we have Citizens United, it just seems to me that they wrestled control of the Constitution away from the American people. And until that changes, their power is just so incredible that the average citizen's not going to be able to change that, even through voting, because they basically court the graph who gets the primetime TV, who gets the primetime visibility in any form of media.
Right.
What are your thoughts on that?
I think you're largely right, Greg, but with the single exception right now of social media, when Facebook and Google and Twitter all start aggressively censoring or diminishing the value of progressive voices, and Google's already done that to some extent with, if you look at all the progressive websites, they're no longer promoting their news content and took them out of their news feeds, places like Alternet and Common Dreams and Truthout. And what you see is that over the last 6 months since that happened, their readership has dropped by about half. That's not good. But that seems to me like the last bastion. Greg, thanks for the call. We'll be right back. It's 10 minutes before the hour. Let's check in with Talk Media News and find out what's going on in the world today. This report brought to you by goatsfortheoldgoat.com and Ellen Ratner's new book, Loving What You Do. On the line with us is the author of Sideswiped, former Congressman Bob Ney. Bob, welcome back to the program.
Thank you, Tom. Happy to be here.
So what's going on in the world today, Bob?
Well, let's tie in two messages. One delivered by President Trump in Tennessee, as you know, where he went after former Governor Phil Bredesen, and then, of course, tied in about...
Saying he never heard of the former governor, which is weird.
I know. We do know the former governor, so that is true. Honestly, he might actually have been telling the truth. He might not know who the governor
He probably was. He's broadly ignorant of American politics.
He may not know. He may honestly not know.
Yeah.
So he went after him and then called him a tool of Schumer, and then he went. And this is the interesting part, though, when he went after Nancy Pelosi as an MS-13 lover. The reason I say interesting part is here's the President of the United States. He specifically targets that phrase out, MS-13 lover. And then if we look at the messages, and it was released today, where the money is being spent, there's two aspects. One, on the Republican side, Tom, they are spending an enormous amount of money and 14,000 ads in a tougher immigration policy. And that's basically the whole thrust of where they're spending
Is that
their
just
money.
in the Tennessee market you're talking about, or nationwide?
No, this is nationwide,
Okay.
right? And now the Democratic side is a message. I'll get to that in a second. But I wanted to focus on the Republican side for a brief minute here because the Republicans were starting to, as we know, soften, some of them, on the Dreamers at least, and on the immigration issues.
Right.
And all of a sudden, they're getting tougher, and they're putting all of their money in these ads. Again, 14,000.
So they're going all in on racism is the bottom line here.
All in on it, and so they've actually kind of went away from the more milder approach that they were taking.
Right. This is they're going to find some illegal alien, undocumented person, whatever you want to call it, here in the United States, who raped and murdered some cute little white girl, and he's going to become their Willie Horton, I predict.
Well, yes, anything that happens, there can be the fear factor there. I also wanted to express something. I have personal knowledge of this, but I don't have any hard, concrete facts, so I want to make that clear for your show. But I have personal knowledge of cases now where students are being denied overseas, are being denied visas one after the other. And I Googled it on the Internet, and I learned this from families overseas, but also on the Internet I see where the universities are getting less people, et cetera. And I also know of 4 personal cases, and this is statistically, you're better at this than me with statistics, but knowing 4 personal cases in the last 2 months of women who were declined a fiancé visa And I actually read the email where it said they weren't telling them what documents were missing. They were just declining them. And they've gotten some of their senators involved. And I'm throwing that out there because, it's hard to statistically find out. And the reason I raise that is immigration now being carried out through the embassies. You follow me?
Yeah, I do.
Being carried out not through law, but through the embassies.
Or is there some kind of filter on it? I mean, were these women whose visas were denied people who are not ethnically, basically Caucasian?
Well, my knowledge comes from specifically India.
So they were not. So they were Indian. They were southern. I guess that's South Asia. They were South Asian rather than European Caucasian.
Correct.
And you wonder if that has anything to do with it. In other words, is our immigration policy, even at the level of onesie-twosies, being done with a racial, bias? That would be bizarre.
And two students that I personally know of knowledge, $150,000 scholarships each, fully paid for, denied entry to the United States.
From what country?
Again, India.
So these were two people from India. Wow.
Right. And I know personally because they called and we tried to link them up with, our Ohio senator, and some of these with Senator Brown to help. So I just want to mention out there because now the pattern is immigration. The president's speech is on immigration. Republicans are spending their money on immigration. Now, on the Democratic side, they're spending, they had 26,000 ads, and that was on saving Medicare and expanding Medicare. So that's going to be, what the Democrats are looking, at least not totally, but that's part of the package they're looking at in the fall.
One of the things that they've discovered, and the Democratic lobbyists and consultants who are, on the kind of corporate Democrat side are very unhappy about this, is that a majority of the electorate, it's like 48, plurality of Republicans, 48% of Republicans, and well over 70% of Democrats think Medicare for all is the winning issue.
Oh, absolutely. And as you know, they didn't tweak that in the health care bill where they could have actually, and that was because of the insurance state of Connecticut, frankly, and Senator Lieberman at that time, who kind of did what they wanted to do on that particular issue with the insurance companies.
Yep.
And then on to the President Trump's ratings. They're at 52% disapproval. He varies anywhere from 47 to 51% at different times of approval or non-approval, but they're very volatile, obviously volatile ratings that keep going back and forth and up and down. The other thing I wanted to mention, I was in shock. I don't know about you. Why does Jeff Sessions, the Attorney General, stay in his job? The tweet just came out about President Trump saying he wishes he hadn't picked him. I don't know how the guy stays in his job or why he would want to stay in his job.
Maybe he thinks being the nation's top cop is the only thing that's preventing him from being prosecuted.
I mean, I think so, but I can't imagine why he's doing this now. Of course, Giuliani's activities where he now says the president will not sit down with Mueller unless they see all the information, even though Trey Gowdy himself has said it's not a spy type of, context where the man went into the campaign.
Well, he's just saying that to get the word Spygate out there, because the more they say it, even though it's a lie, it's an outrageous lie, the more they say it, the more likely people will start to believe it. It's why 48% of Republicans right now believe that 3 million people voted illegally in the last election.
Correct.
I mean, you repeat a lie often enough, Hitler was right, and people believe it. I'm sorry, Bob.
Right. And everybody on the Hill knows Rudy Giuliani was not picked for his legal expertise.
Yeah.
He was picked to do exactly what he's doing, which is to be the junkyard dog on TV and in the media to go after Mueller for this.
Yeah, he's the hitman to take down Mueller. He's the he's the corporate hitman. That's amazing. All righty, Bob Ney, the author of Sideswiped. Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Congressman. Great talking with you. I appreciate the news report. We'll be back right after the break here with Jordan Cheriton is going to be reporting from Flint. Stick around.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. From New York, I'm Luke Vargas.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by X-Chair, the X-Chair office chair. xchairthom.com is the website, xchairthom.com. The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com. Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242 or visit tomsbeets.com. It's the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Our book today is Us Versus Them, The Failure of Globalism by Ian Bremmer. This is from Chapter 1, titled Winners and Losers. It's time for a local revolution, the candidate told the roaring crowd. Countries are no longer nations, but markets. Borders are erased. Everyone can come to our country, and this has cut our salaries and our social protections. This dilutes our cultural identity. Marine Le Pen's 4 sentences capture every important element of the anxiety rising across the Western world. The borders are open and the foreigners are coming. They'll steal your job. They will cost you your pension and your health care by bankrupting your system. They will pollute your culture. Some of them are killers. Le Pen fell short in her bid to become France's president in 2017, but her message remains compelling for the 21st century politics of us versus them. But this is not a story about Marine Le Pen or Donald J. Trump or any of the other populist powerhouses who have emerged in Europe and the United States in recent years. Spin the camera toward the furious crowd. There's the real story. It's not the messenger that drives this movement. It's the fears, often, if not always, justified, of ordinary people. Fears of lost jobs, surging waves of strangers, vanishing national identities, and the incomprehensible public violence associated with terrorism. It's the growing doubt among citizens that government can protect them, provide them with opportunities for a better life, and help them remain the masters of their fate. As of December 2015, just 6% of people in the United States, 4% in Germany, 4% in Britain, and 3% in France believe the world is getting better. The pessimistic majority suspects that those with power, money, and influence care more about their cosmopolitan world than they do about their fellow citizens. Many citizens of these countries now believe that globalization works for the favored few, but not for them. And they have a point. Globalization, the cross-border flow of ideas, information, money, people, goods, and services, has resulted in an interconnected world where national leaders have increasingly limited ability to protect the lives and livelihoods of their citizens. In the digital age, borders no longer mean what citizens think they mean. In some ways, they barely exist. Globalism, the belief that the interdependence that created globalization is a good thing, is indeed the ideology of the elite. Political leaders of the wealthy West have been globalism's biggest advocates, building a system that has propelled ideas, information, people, money, goods, and services across borders at a speed and on a scale without precedent in human history. Sure, more than 1 billion people have risen from poverty in recent decades, and economies and markets have come a long way from the financial crisis. But along with new opportunities come serious vulnerabilities, and the refusal of the global elite to acknowledge the downsides of the new interdependence confirms the suspicions of those losing their sense of security and standard of living that elites in New York and Paris have more in common with elites in Rome and San Francisco than with their discarded countrymen in Tulsa, Turin, Tuscaloosa, and Toulon. The globalists gutted the American working class and created a middle class in Asia, former White House strategist Steve Bannon told The Hollywood Reporter a few days after Donald Trump's 2016 election victory. The issue is now about Americans looking not to get effed over, end of quote. In the United States, the jobs that once lifted generations of Americans into the middle class and kept them there for life are vanishing. Crime and drug addiction are rising. While 87% of Chinese and 74% of Indians told pollsters in 2017 that they believe their country is moving in the right direction, only 43% of Americans said the same thing. In Europe, the European Commission and the unelected bureaucrats who enforce its rules have legislated for its 28 member nations without understanding their very needs. In recent years, they've failed to halt a debt crisis that has forced many Europeans to accept lower wages, higher prices, later retirement, less generous pensions, and an uncertain future, all while telling them that they must bail out foreign countries that have spent their way into debt. In the migrant crisis, globalist European leaders insisted that all EU members must accept Muslim refugees in numbers determined in Brussels, and barricades and a spike in nationalism were the result. I'm defining nationalism here as one form of us versus them intended to rally members of one nation against those of other nations. Were the wave of populist nationalism sweeping the United States and Europe only signs of globalism's failure, it would be bad enough. But there's a larger crisis coming. Many of the storms creating turmoil in the U.S. and Europe, particularly technological change in the workplace, broader awareness of income inequality, are now headed across borders and into the developing world, where governments and institutions are not ready. Developing countries are especially vulnerable because the institutions that create stability in developing countries are not as sturdy, and social safety nets aren't nearly as strong as in the United States and the European Union. They face an even bigger gap between rich and poor, and the reality that new technologies will kill large numbers of jobs that lifted expectations for a better life will be much harder to manage. In short, just as the financial crisis had a cascading effect through financial markets and real economies around the world, so the sources of anger convulsing Europe and America will send shockwaves through dozens of other countries. Some will absorb these shocks, some of them won't. As poorer people in developing countries become more aware of what they're missing or losing, many will pick up rocks. The book, Us Versus Them by Ian Bremmer. Rather than an
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. On the line with us, progressive independent journalist Jordan Chariton. He's typically reporting on political corruption, environmental contamination, and the disappearing middle class over at his website, jordanchariton.com. You can tweet him at Jordan Chariton. Jordan, welcome back to the program. You're reporting from Flint, Michigan all this week?
I am.
So tell us what's going on there.
Yeah, I've been working on a major piece that I published yesterday that really dissects the actual testing of the water here in Flint over the last 2 years. Very recently, an EPA-funded scientist declared that the water was meeting federal standards, and the state of Michigan has declared that the water is now, quote, restored. And this is what allowed Governor Snyder to shut down the water pods in Flint several weeks ago, citing this data. So I just published a piece that basically shows, as far as I can tell, that the science has some serious holes in it. And there's very, very cherry-picked testing and flawed testing that's gone on here to declare the water safe. So I'm speaking with residents, plumbers, politicians here this week about that reporting.
What kind of, I know you can play games with whether or not you allow water to run before you test it or how long you let it run, things like that. I mean, in what ways are they gaming the system or scamming the residents of Flint in order to be able to, avoid the cost of passing out bottled water, basically?
Yeah, so basically there was two different tests. You had an EPA-funded scientist by the name of Mark Edwards, as well as the Michigan Department of Environmental Quality. Edwards actually declared the water, normal and meeting federal regulations by testing literally 34 homes. He cited 34 homes in a city of nearly 40,000, saying I met EPA regulations. He also, as part of the EPA's...
Were those 34 homes clustered in an area that was low risk, or were they randomly scattered throughout the city?
Randomly scattered throughout the city.
Well, that might not be unreasonable. I mean, you do small samples to project large trends. I mean, that's how exit polling works, for example.
Yeah, there's a lot of problems with it. First, to meet the EPA's lead and copper rule, you actually have to be testing. Over half of your sample size has to be from homes connected to lead service lines. Obviously, lead is going to leach from lead service lines, mostly.
Right.
There's no verification that these homes are even lead. I have them on the record basically saying that's a problem with the lead and copper rule. We don't know. The second part of that is Edwards, as well as the state, used old records that were literally written on index cards to surmise that the homes they were testing were actually connected to lead service lines. These records, 11 to 15,000 homes were missing. I have the director of this study literally on the record telling me, yeah, I mean, the study was very flawed because records were missing. A lot of the homes had to be thrown out because it was unreadable on the index cards what service line they had, whether it was lead, whether it was copper. You also had the state. The state was really cherry picking where they were testing homes. The 2 zip codes with the highest lead level content found was barely had homes tested. So basically, this is a story not just about Flint, but about the inadequate EPA regulations in the first place that are allowing this small sample size, imperfect records to be used to declare, you know, a city like Flint that had this man-made disaster now safe for drinking water.
Remarkable. So, is there going to be any pushback, or has this become political? What's happening in Flint, right now?
Yeah, so residents have been, really fighting back because they're being told, the water is safe. But meanwhile, residents I'm talking to and interviewing have ongoing health problems that are new. They're showering and bathing and having stinging in their eyes, ongoing rashes. You have ongoing autoimmune issues, cancers, kidney, liver. You're also having, stacks and stacks of medical bills. So the residents have been saying you cannot shut down these water pods until all the lead service lines are replaced in the city. But the governor, citing this data that my story is about, said, well, our EPA testing shows that the water is now back to normal levels, so I'm shutting down the water pods. So you have residents, through the city council, they're trying to get the water pods reopened. They're trying to get more thorough testing because it's not just a lead problem. They have found really alarming levels of bacteria here in Flint, and bacteria causing all sorts of health illnesses. So the residents are fighting back. Unfortunately, this governor, Rick Snyder, who obviously, oversaw this really big disaster, has been doing everything possible to essentially skirt responsibility for paying for water bottles, things like that. So it's really residents fighting back more than actual politicians.
Are there any specific organizations? I mean, if somebody listening or watching this program right now were to want to go to a website and, sign a petition or kick in $15 or whatever, what do they do?
Yeah, Flint Rising is an organization I've interviewed a few times. Residents from Flint, they have been doing grassroots organizing here, organizing protests, definitely organizing water donations. I think their website is flintrising.com, if I'm mistaken. There's also donations coming in now to churches. I believe the Court Street Church here in Flint for water since Snyder shut down the water pods.
Right.
So there are organizations helping, but really the most important thing is people need to get informed because, I hear what you're saying as far as, well, small sample sizes are used all the time, but for a disaster like Flint, looking at that few homes, also really relying on really shoddy records of where the lead service lines even are. They just found last week that there's 14,000 lead service lines still in the ground. That's 15% more than was projected.
Wow.
So really there's a lot of problems here as far as, basically the science, they're using this one-size-fits-all EPA regulation, but the city has way more lead service lines than were thought, and we're still seeing, I've counted over 150 in the last 6 months, elevated lead samples coming back across the city. There's also a staggering level of homes that were last tested in 2016 or 2017. They had hundreds of parts per billion over the EPA level, which is 15 parts per billion is the allowable limit. The homes that had hundreds of parts over were never retested. I spoke with a gentleman. He had 11,000 parts per billion of lead in his home. They never went back to retest it. And that's all across the city, there's homes like that. So I think it's really premature to declare the water restored. I have Aaron Brockovich in the story, Congressman Dan Kildee, who represents Flint, basically questioning the science because it's really hard to believe that you could declare the water safe here when there's so few homes that have been tested. And like I said, the records are very suspect.
Amazing. Jordan Chariton, progressive independent journalist. Jordan Chariton, CHARITON.com is the website, and the Twitter handle as well is Jordan Chariton. Jordan, thanks.
Yeah, and I'll be here all week, youtube.com/Jordan Chariton Reports.
You got it. We'll be back.
Thanks.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Back with more of the news of the day and your calls right after this. And welcome back. Wanda in Des Moines, Iowa. Hey, Wanda. Thanks for watching Free Speech TV. What's on your mind today?
Yeah. Hi, Tom. Yeah. Regarding this impeachment question, I do agree with you that we have to wait for the Mueller investigation to conclude. But after that, I think impeachment is called for. And we talk about that if we do this, we have to be careful because there's going to be a backlash. Well, the way I look at it, Bush v. Gore in 2000, the Supreme Court, conservative, put Bush in office, and then to top that off, the American people voted him in again, even knowing that he lied about Iraq. Then during that time, remember, the redistricting started, and then, they loaded up the Congress, and then when Obama was elected, then they started the voter ID. Last point I want to make is Gorsuch. I distinctly remember everybody saying this is going to backfire on the Republicans. There sits Gorsuch in the Supreme Court. Now we have, of course, the Supreme Court, they have the Supreme Court, the White House, the Senate, and Congress. So where was all this backlash? The people went right along with it, and they're sitting in power. So
doesn't that argue against impeachment? I mean, if the Republicans have been this successful and impeachment hands them a more energized base, that's going to increase their success. I'm asking this rhetorically, Wanda. I'm not trying to debate it with you. I don't know the answer.
Well, what I'm saying is maybe right after Clinton, his popularity did go up, and you're correct.
It did, substantially.
You're right. But then after that, it's been all Republican.
Yeah, well, this is, ironically, the reason that Al Gore, I don't believe Al Gore lost the election. I mean, when you look at the recount from Florida, Al Gore actually won Florida, and that's even after Jeb Bush pulled 90,000 African Americans off the voting rolls 3 months before the election. But my point is that had Al Gore embraced Bill Clinton and said Bill was unfairly prosecuted, because Al and Tipper were such moralists, particularly his wife Tipper. They were almost Republican, such moralists. And Gore was so offended that Bill Clinton had that affair and other affairs, apparently, that he told Bill Clinton that he didn't want him to campaign for him, And so Clinton had to sit out that race, that 2000 race. And Bill Clinton was one of the most popular politicians in America at the time, in part because he'd been impeached. And if Gore had let him campaign for him, it wouldn't have been a squeaker that Bush could steal with the Supreme Court. That's the power. That's the power, the kind of negative power of impeachment. I mean, that's how badly impeachment can help the party being impeached and hurt the party that's doing the impeaching.
I see your point too, and I agree with you, for the most part.
But it's something we got to do. Sounds like you're saying.
I mean, I'm looking at where we sit right now.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
they have complete power.
No, I get it. Wanda, we're out of time. But, I get it. I get it. And it's a tough one. I mean, we need to give this some serious thought. We'll be right back. Okay, some of our favorite memes of the day here. This is looking back fondly on the Reagan years. This one is from topplebush.com. The Iran-Contra scandal, 14 convictions. Decisions being made by Nancy's astrologer. The HUD scandal, 16 convictions, $8 billion in taxpayer money lost. The SNL scandal, over a $1 trillion bailout cost to the taxpayer. 32 convictions in his administrations during the 8-year term. 32, the most of any president in history. 7.5% average rate of unemployment. 7.5. It hasn't been that bad. It's supply side voodoo economics. Billions, actually it's trillions, wasted on Star Wars spending, escalation of the arms race, which delayed nuclear weapons reductions. Buyouts, leveraged buyouts of $64 billion a year on average throughout his 8 years, destroyed many good businesses and companies. He oversaw the destruction of the labor movement and at least 130 separate investigations against Defense Department contractors that were corruptly engaged with the Reagan administration. Meanwhile, since 1978, the year before, the year that Reagan started running for president, since 1978, college tuition in the United States has increased by 1,120%. Medical care, the cost of medical care has increased by 601%. The cost of food since 1978 has gone up 244%. The cost of housing in the United States has gone up 380% since 1978. Meanwhile, the pay of average workers since 1978 has gone up just 10%. Minimum wage workers, the pay of them has fallen by 5.5%. And the average pay of CEOs has gone up 937%. That's from Occupy Democrats. And then this, of course, from Bernie Sanders. Yes, the system is rigged. Today, the top 1% owns 41.8% of the financial wealth of America. The bottom 60% owns all of 1.7%. In fact, the top 1/10 of 1% of Americans owns almost as much wealth as the bottom 90% of the American people. Just let that sink in. It's truly breathtaking stuff. I mean, this is just mind-boggling, mind-numbing. Randy in Middlesboro, Kentucky. Hey, Randy, thanks for listening to 880 AM. What's up?
Oh, man, I wanted to explain what ZTE phone company did and why they're in so much trouble.
This is the Chinese phone manufacturer, right?
Correct. And how they are a doomed company unless whatever Trump did somehow gets them out of trouble.
Go for it.
Okay. All right. So they signed a treaty with the United States saying that they would not make phones for Iran. They got caught, and obviously they broke that treaty. When they broke that treaty, it meant that they could no longer buy products from the United States, any United States company that manufactured anything for phones. So that's your Snapdragon processors, your Mali processors, your Gorilla Glass, Intel processors, because there have been a couple phone companies that have done that. Anything you can think of that's inside of a smartphone pretty much is manufactured. It's manufactured around the world, but it all comes back to a United States company. So they were doomed.
Right. And just to clean up the language here, it was not a treaty. What happened was China is a signer to, among other countries, to these U.S. sanctions against Iran, the United Nations sanctions of Iran and of North Korea. And so companies are not supposed to be selling some products to those countries, most products to those countries. ZTE was selling phones to both those countries and in violation of that, and that's what they got nailed for. And originally it was just going to be $1 billion fine,
And then the Defense Department said...
Oh, I forgot about that part.
Yeah, and then the Defense Department said you can't sell these phones in the United States. And the reason for that was, for example, when you use your Apple phone and you say, Siri, tell me how to get home, that goes through Apple's servers. When you use an Android phone and you say, Alexa, or however you say it, whatever you say to the Android phone, take me to downtown, that command goes through Google's servers, because Google provides us with Android. So with a ZTE phone, if you say, take me to so-and-so, it's going through a server in China. So everything that's happening in your microphone, everything that's happening with your camera on your phone, and all email you send and everything else, potentially could be monitored by the Chinese. And that's why it's against the law to sell these phones on U.S. military bases, because the U.S. military does not want their people to have these phones. And it's why, frankly, none of us should be having these phones, in my opinion, if this information is accurate.
Yeah, from what I understand, I know the FBI, the CIA, and all the directors came out and said that ZTE and Huawei could no longer were bad phones to buy for the United States.
Right, for that reason, because the Chinese can do a man-in-the-middle thing.
No evidence, at least not for Huawei anyway.
Yeah, well, it's because of the Chinese man-in-the-middle. Randy, I need to move along, but thanks for the call and thanks for raising the issue. Ryan in Green Bay, Wisconsin, you wanted to get back, and thanks for listening to SiriusXM, Ryan. You wanted to get back to Mueller?
Yeah, hey, Tom, what's happening? Yeah, I mean, it's a no-brainer. You got to let this Mueller investigation play out.
Right.
There's way too much misinformation out there. I mean, I've got good friends of mine that I think are smart or educated, but they don't even know that it's a fact that Russia meddled in our election.
And not only that Mueller has already achieved guilty pleas in, 4 cases now? And is aggressively prosecuting some 20 people, including 13 or 14 Russians?
So you've got a massive amount of people that they don't even know what's going on. There's way too much misinformation. You got to get the facts out. And question for you real quick is, I mean, I got to imagine that Mueller's playing chess. Do you think he's 10 steps ahead? I mean, Trump seems to be playing checkers and kind of reacting, where Mueller's just plugging away. And really, I wasn't around for Watergate, but apparently this investigation is actually moving along quickly.
It is, yeah, it's so far. I mean, the Watergate investigation took a little less than 2 years, as I recall. Because it happened before the election. The break-in was reported before the election, and it wasn't until after not just the election, but the inauguration that any really serious investigation. That was when the Deep Throat stuff started happening. And had that not happened, had Mark Felt, the assistant director of the FBI, not spilled the beans to Woodward and Bernstein, we may still not have known what happened, and Richard Nixon might have been a president continuously. So, the investigation stuff is really important, and we all want to see what Bob Mueller has up his sleeve. But, that said, in terms of your question about who's winning right now, it seems like in terms of the PR war, Trump and his sycophants, particularly Rudy Giuliani and Devin Nunes, putting out flat-out lies. Mueller hasn't found anything. There's nothing there. That kind of stuff. When Mueller actually has already achieved conviction. There's one guy in prison right now because of what Mueller did, that Dutch lawyer, that young guy from Holland. I mean, he's literally in prison after pleading guilty to something that Mueller nailed him on that has to do with this whole Trump-Russia thing. So, it's a real thing. Ryan, thanks for the call. It's just amazing how it's been blacked out of Fox and right-wing hate radio.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
It's coming up on 28 minutes past the hour. We'll be back with more of the news of the day and your calls right after this. Today in the Thom Hartmann University Book Club, we're reading from Henry Wadsworth Longfellow's collected poems. This is the 1841 edition, but there's modern ones available too. It's the same poems. I want to start with a Psalm of Life, one of my favorites, one that I learned as a kid.
Tell me not in mournful numbers, life is but an empty dream, for the soul is dead that slumbers, and things are not what they seem. Life is real, life is earnest, and the grave is not its goal. Dust thou art, to dust returnest, was not spoken of the soul. Not enjoyment and not sorrow is our destined end or way, but to act that each tomorrow finds us further than today. Art is long and time is fleeting, and our hearts, though stout and brave, still like muffled drums are beating funeral marches to the grave. In the world's broad field of battle, in the bivouac of life, be not like dumb, driven cattle. Be a hero in the strife. Lives of, I trust no future, however present. Let the dead past bury its dead. Act within the living present, heart within and God o'erhead. Lives of great men all remind us we can make our lives sublime, and departing leave behind us footsteps in the sands of time. Footprints that perhaps another sailing o'er life's solemn main, a forlorn and shipwrecked brother, seeing, will take heart again. Let us then be up and doing with a heart for any fate, still achieving, still pursuing. Learn to labor and to wait. And the book opens with Voices of the Night, another of his brilliant poems. This is from the prelude. Pleasant it was when woods were green and winds were soft and low, to lie amid some sylvan scene where the long drooping boughs between, shadows dark and sunlight sheen, alternate come and go. Or where the denser grove receives no sunlight from above, but the dark foliage interweaves in one unbroken roof of leaves, underneath whose sloping eaves the shadows hardly move. Beneath some patriarchal tree I lay upon the ground. His hoary arms uplifted he, and all the broad leaves over me clapped their little hands in glee with one continuous sound. A slumberous sound, a sound that brings the feelings of a dream, as of innumerable wings, as when a bell no longer swings. Faint the hollow murmur rings, o'er meadow, lake, and stream. And dreams of that which cannot die, bright visions come to me, as lapped in thought I used to lie and gaze into the summer sky where the sailing clouds went by like ships upon the sea. Dreams that the soul of youth engage, ere fancy has been quelled. Old legends of the monkish age, traditions of the saint and sage, tales that have the rhyme of age, and chronicles of eld. And loving still these quaint old themes, even in the city's throng, I feel the freshness of the streams that, crossed by glades and sunny gleams, water the green land of dreams, the holy land of song. Therefore at Pentecost, which brings the spring clothed like a bride, when nestling buds unfold their wings and bishops' caps have golden rings, musing upon many things, I sought the woodlands wide. The green trees whispered low and mild. It was a sound of joy. They were my playmates when a child, and rocked me in their arms so wild, but they looked at me and smiled as if I were a boy. And ever whispered, mild and low, come be a child once more, and waved their long arms to and fro, and beckoned solemnly and slow, oh, I could not choose but go into the woodlands hoar. Into the blithe and breathing air, into the solemn wood, solemn and silent everywhere. Nature with folded hands seemed there, kneeling at her evening prayer. Like one in prayer, I stood. Before me rose an avenue of tall and sombrous pines. Abroad their fan-like branches grew, and where the sunlight darted through, spread a vapor soft and blue in long and sloping lines. And falling on my weary brain like a fast falling shower, the dreams of youth come back again, low lispings of the summer rain dropping in the ripening grain, once upon the flower. Visions of childhood, stay, oh stay, ye were so sweet and wild, and distant voices seemed to say, it cannot be, they pass away, other themes demand the lay, thy lay, thou art no more a child. The land of song within thee lies, watered by living springs. The lids of Fanny's sleepless eyes are grates into that paradise, Holy thoughts like stars arise, its clouds are angels' wings. Learn that henceforth thy song shall be not mountains capped with snow, no forests surrounding like the sea, nor rivers flowing ceaselessly where the woodlands bend to see the bending heavens below. There is a forest where the din of iron branches sounds, a mighty river roars between, and whoever looks therein sees the heavens all black with sin, sees not its depths nor bounds. Look then into thine heart and write, yes, into life's dream, a deep stream. Longfellow. It's 34 minutes past the hour. It's the Thom Hartmann Program, Viagra for your brain, but it does not lead to stiff thinking. Let's see here. Terry in St. Paul, Minnesota. Hey, Terry, thanks for listening to AM 950. What's up?
Yeah. Am I on the air?
You are, Terry. What's on your mind?
All right. Well, I just wanted to get up to speed on, we got 10 candidates running for Wisconsin governorship. And I want to tell you, Tom, a lot of people like Trump that I have coffee with, but they don't like Walker. So it's an interesting phenomenon.
That's very interesting. How do they differentiate between the two?
That's what I said. They're one of the same. They believe in the same Republican principles.
Yeah, they're both weasels, and Walker serves the interests of the billionaires. Trump is one.
Mm-hmm. So but I think we got a real good chance to knock him off in the state of Wisconsin here. I really do. We haven't had the primary yet, but like I say, there's 10 people running, so excellent chance.
Yeah, well, we'll see where it goes. Terry, thanks for the call. Brian in Dubuque, Iowa. Hey, Brian, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. I was going to say something, but I'm not sure it's really worth anything. So I'm going to rattle off some lyrics from a song real quick. It's just real short. Each of us a cell of awareness, imperfect and incomplete. Genetic blends with uncertain ends on a fortune hunt that's far too fleet. Have a good day, Tom. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Brian. That was interesting. Wayne in Chicago. Hey, Wayne, what's on your mind?
Hey, good afternoon, Tom.
Hey, Wayne. You wanted to talk about Roseanne?
Yeah, real quickly. Tom, I said about maybe 3 weeks ago, maybe 4. I think when her show first started again, I don't even watch TV, but for some reason I caught this. They rolled out a couch with her and John Goodman on Jimmy Kimmel's show. Now, I watched Jimmy's interview with her. She was cursing all the time during the interview. Actually, she was disrespecting Jimmy, but he was like playing it off. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
She was just saying whatever she wanted to say. So nobody should be surprised by what Roseanne said.
No, she tweeted something like this back in 2013 about Susan Rice, calling her implying that she was an ape also.
Right. I mean, Roseanne has always been a loose cannon. I've never liked her since she did the national anthem that day, what she did that day.
Grabbed her crotch. Yeah.
But here's my point, Tom. There's a talk show host. Now, he's not, this format is not conservative. It's overnight, one of the most popular late night shows overnight right now, like from midnight to 4 a.m. Central Time.
Yeah, you talking about George Norrie?
That's who I'm talking about.
Yeah.
He said point blank, I would fire every African American player who would kneel during the national anthem.
Yeah.
I consider that even worse than Roseanne because he's always trying to play it like he's on the up and up. He's straight. He's not racist, none of that. But he always has on these right-wing conservative guests at the beginning of the show. So that was my tip-off right there. But he finally showed his whole card and let me know what he was.
Yeah, it's really sad because Art Bell used to be, he just didn't get into partisan politics at all. He was all about the paranormal and what's going on and freaky stuff. Right. And,
conspiracy theories and whatnot, but not ones that were partisan or political. I didn't know Art Bell well, but I met Art Bell, and we were in the same industry. We'd meet at industry events. I don't know George. I know people who know George, and they think of him as a very decent and nice guy. But it seems to me that some of these guys, I told the story yesterday about the conservative guy who runs one of the major conservative websites, who told me that I could become a multimillionaire if I simply became a conservative and started taking conservative positions.
You could.
I know it's true, and in fact he was willing to help make it happen, and of course that ain't going to happen. I mean, I'm very happy where I am and doing what I'm doing, but I can understand the pressure on somebody whose show is otherwise not political to make it a little more political in order to get on a few more stations, because a lot of these, particularly some of the bigger stations, are owned by companies that basically only want right-wing programming. And I don't know if that's the case with George, and I haven't heard him say those things. I haven't, frankly, listened to his show in years, but, he does a good show. I don't listen to it because I'm sound asleep. But, there are, your point, Wayne, that, what Roseanne said, shouldn't surprise us. Absolutely. And that kind of rhetoric, what George Norrie might have said, amplify that times 100,
He didn't might have said it. He said it, Tom.
Yeah, no, I believe it. I believe you, Wayne. You've never lied to me. I believe you. But my point is that the guys who are doing what I do, which is daytime commentary on news and politics, are even worse. They're radically worse. And when it comes to racial dog whistling, and particularly, well, I don't even want to name any individuals. I just these guys are my colleagues, but I'm very disappointed in what's going on. Wayne, thanks for the call.
Let me say one more thing, Tom. Let me say one more thing.
Go for it.
When he started bringing on these conservative right-wing people, George Norrie, Art Bell was mad about it, Tom. He was mad, and he let George know, but he kept doing it.
Yeah, well, and Art's dead now, so it's George's franchise, and he'll do with it what he wants. I suspect that over the long term, the people who get deeply in bed with these hardcore right-wingers, particularly the most toxic ones, the ones that are spreading racial hatred and misogyny, the people who get in bed with them are going to end up being burned. But, time will tell. Time will tell. Anyhow, Wayne, thanks for the call. Glenn in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. Hey, Wayne, what's on your mind?
Hey, it's Glenn. Hey, anyways, thanks, Tom, for taking the call. Hey, I just wanted to know when you were finally going to give up and accept the fact that Hillary Clinton lost the election because she was a terrible candidate. I supported Trump because I did not want another politician like Hillary Clinton in office. She lost because she was a bad candidate. Russia had absolutely nothing to do with it. I served in the military in the United States Marine Corps, and I guarantee I wouldn't support something Russia did. Hillary lost because she was a bad candidate. Why don't you guys accept that and move forward and try to win next time? Stop whining about the past.
Well, I've been saying for some time, Glenn, that I thought that Hillary Clinton was not the best candidate at the time. The Times were calling for change, and she was perceived as the establishment candidate. And that her campaign, Robbie Mook, ran a terrible campaign. I mean, the guy should never be hired by anybody ever again, and the Podestas as well. But that said, if you were to look at, for example, Detroit, where 75,000 people stood in line, African Americans all, stood in line for hours, or the majority certainly, stood in line for hours to vote, and then didn't bother to vote for president. 75,000 people in a state Trump only won by 10,500 votes. If you look at Wisconsin, where Scott Walker purged over 100,000 people off the voting rolls, knocked them off the voting rolls so that when they showed up to vote, they were given provisional ballots, which were never counted in Wisconsin. Over 100,000 of those people, principally in Milwaukee, largely African American. And Trump won Wisconsin by what, 13,000 votes, as I recall. Same thing in Pennsylvania. Over 200,000 people purged off the voting rolls, almost all of them African American. When you look at just those three states, Hillary Clinton would have won all of those states if the Republicans hadn't tried to rig the election. Glenn, I'm not buying this it's all Hillary's fault thing. Yeah, she's a flawed candidate and ran a flawed campaign, but I still believe that she won the election. And that election fraud was being done by partisan Republicans in those states, particularly voter suppression, But also, I want to know what the hell happened with those 75,000 voting machines in Detroit that failed to record a vote for president when people very carefully voted for their city council member, their mayor, their state senator, their state representative, their U.S. member of Congress, and one of their senators. They voted for all those people, and then they left President of the United States blank? I don't think so. Your turn, Glenn.
You know, if you could prove that in court, maybe you could go somewhere. But
I don't have to prove it in a court. It's already established. Nobody is denying it. Michigan, you know, Rick Snyder, the Republican Party of Michigan, they go, yep, 75,000 people didn't bother to vote for Republicans. It must be because they're in Detroit and they must be, you know, just dumb black people. I mean, that's basically how the white Republican establishment has been spinning this in the media and in response to this. It's been known for some time, you know, since the election, basically. Glenn, there's some really evil stuff going on in this country. And as far as I can tell, it's got nothing to do with Democrats or Clintons. We'll be back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
It's coming up on 45 minutes after the hour, 1:45. Here on the Thom Hartmann Program, the home of the political revolution. And welcome back. Diane in Valdosta, Georgia. Boy, it's been a while since I've been in Valdosta. How are you, Diane? What's on your mind today?
I'm good, Tom. How are you?
I'm great, but I'll get better, hopefully.
Okay, this may seem like it's not important, but it was important to me because my heart sunk when I saw it. I was watching a news report with Trump standing in front of some paintings in the White House, and I realized when I was watching 60 Minutes, they were saying how he would tell people that the paintings he had at Mar-a-Lago in different places were real, but they were actually fakes.
Right.
Is there somebody in the White House making sure that Trump doesn't walk away with a bunch of our stuff? It may seem strange to you, but it's like when it hit me, it just my heart sank. He's a thief. He's a liar. He hires thieves. It's just in the pattern.
Yeah, that's the kind of thing that could make a good thriller. Somebody in the White House discovers that the president is trying to, has hired a knockoff artist to redo the famous painting of George Washington that Dolly Madison smuggled out of the White House in the War of 1812. And the good guy or girl is trying to break the case wide open, and Trump is stealing it. I think it's far more likely that they're going to destroy the White House or harm the White House by the way that they're redecorating it. They're turning everything into gaudy and gold, even gold-plated seats in the press office and stuff like that. That they're doing that, and to what extent he's going to walk off with the china or the silverware, that wouldn't surprise me at all. Oops, we didn't.
It wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah, we didn't realize that the moving van was not supposed to take the beds from the Lincoln bedroom.
Because he needs money. He definitely will need the money. So.
Or it's just collector's items. I mean, he clearly thinks of this country as his toy. Why would he not think of the White House? Yeah. It's a tough one.
It just made my heart sink. It really did. And I was like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
But that's all it was.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Diane, thanks for bringing it up. I want to get another caller in here real quick before the break. Lori in Club, Missouri. Hey, Lori, what's up?
I so enjoy your show, Tom. Thank you so much for taking my call. I have a comment, an observation, and I have a burning question. The observation is I was 33 years in the Pacific Northwest before transplanted into southern Missouri. And in my observation down here, the big obstacle for progressive thinking is there's a lot of churches down here.
Yeah.
And it's all about abortion. It's all about pro-life instead of pro-choice.
Right.
My question to you is I have been listening to assistant federal prosecutors and attorneys for months about indicting a sitting president, and nobody has given me the right answer or an answer that makes me understand why you can't.
It has not been adjudicated by this. It has not been adjudicated by the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court did conclude in the case of Richard Nixon, and that logic was used in the case of Bill Clinton, that a sitting president can be deposed, that you can issue a subpoena demanding that they speak to you, and they must in a civil case. And but they have not. There has been no conclusion about whether a sitting president can be indicted. So that's the tough one, Lori. I don't know the answer either. And Damien in Manorville, New York says,
"Hey, what's going on, Tom? Thank you for taking my call."
Sure.
Listen, I think ABC should have they had every right to fire her, every single right, because they don't want Roseanne attached to the brand of ABC.
Well, plus it was starting to lose the money. I mean, there was within minutes of that tweet, there was talk about an advertiser boycott.
Like I said, it doesn't matter. It's their private organization. They have every right.
You're absolutely right,
and they
Damien.
don't want to attach. So now here's the deal: when the Giants, New York Giants, asked Colin Kaepernick to come and try out, thousands of fans, literally, contacted the Giants and said, if that guy suits up, we will never be Giants fans ever again. And you know what the organization said? We don't want this guy associated with our brand.
Right.
How is that any different? Because now all of a sudden there's collusion. What if the NFL said, no, you're fired? That's our policy, and it's the exact same thing, except that now we're turning the Kaepernick thing into a racist issue where
that's because Kaepernick was protesting. Damien, that's because Kaepernick was protesting racist policing policies. But you're absolutely right, legally. I mean, you're absolutely right. The NFL and individual teams can pretty much do what they want with their players. That's how corporations are set up in the United States. They're basically kingdoms, and the laws support that. And I wouldn't want to change those laws. The question is, what kind of damage does it do long term? It may be that the Giants, looking at Kaepernick and hearing from a whole bunch of racist white fans that they don't want Kaepernick and bowing to that pressure, it may be over the short term that helped the Giants. But I suggest that over the long term, it's really going to harm their brand. And although apparently all the other NFL teams have made the decision right now that Kaepernick is not, that they'd rather keep the white racist fans going, because that is, whites are the largest percentage of the fan base for the NFL. And there's always a slice of racists among white people.
Hold on. Just because somebody is against Kaepernick and what he's doing, people can say there's other ways to protest. Well, look, think about this. If the N-word, even if it's repeated in a rap song by a white person, if the black audience says, whoa, that's offensive to us, you have to cater to your audience. Well, maybe that's the same thing with the black players. If it's offending the audience, they should find a different way to protest, because you have to think about the fan base, and it doesn't necessarily.
Yeah, Damien, what you're missing is the protest part of peaceful protest. Genuine peaceful protest, nonviolent protest, has to be disruptive in order to work. So, I get it that people who are made uncomfortable by black NFL players saying we are concerned that unarmed black men are disproportionately murdered by police officers in the United States every year compared to unarmed white men. I get it that some white people are made uncomfortable by that, but that doesn't mean it's not true and real. And I predict, Damien, that you're going to find, if you look back 5 or 10 years from now on this conversation you and I are having right now, that you're going to find that you are on the same side of history as those people who in the 1960s, or the 1950s rather, excuse me, after Brown versus Board of Education, and right up to 1965 when Bobby Kennedy, or 64 when Kennedy started, it was 63 when Bobby Kennedy started using the Commerce Clause to enforce, to break up segregation in the South, that those people were on the wrong side of history too. They were saying, hey, Woolworths has every right not to let black people sit at their counters in Georgia. They have every right to. That's what the state allows. It's not a violation of state law. And that was true at that time. But it was a violation of federal law. And Bobby Kennedy came along and said, okay, you are engaged in interstate commerce because you buy ketchup from Heinz in Pennsylvania and you serve it to people at your lunch counters, and it's right sitting there on the lunch counters. And so therefore we can send in the federal marshals. And a lot of people were very outraged by that, a lot of racists. But a lot of conservatives were saying, yeah, this is the right thing. And ultimately, it proved to be the right thing. Damien, I predict that you're going to find yourself in that position. Thanks for the call. Obi in La Crosse, Wisconsin. Hey, Obi, what's on your mind?
Obi in La Crosse.
Obi, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Hi, Tom. A lot of people criticize Nancy Pelosi when she said that impeachment is not on the table. What she did not say is that it's still in the kitchen. We got to let Mueller and his crew do their work, and when they come out of the kitchen, then we'll take a look and see what they come out with before we decide whether to put it on the table or not.
Yeah, very well said.
And the other thing is that it's probably not going to happen during this Congress anyway. The more important thing is that we take the Congress back, both sides of Congress if we can,
right,
not to bring about impeachment, but once we take over the Congress, then it's a moot point practically, because then he's just an impotent lame duck from then on.
Yeah, very, very well said. Abi, I agree with every point you made. Thank you. Debbie in Buffalo. Hey, Debbie, last minute of the hour. What's up? Last minute of the show, actually. Debbie? Okay, let's try Richard in Naples, Florida. Richard, you're on the air.
Oh, hey, I have a limited amount of time, but I'm just having so much fun listening to you, Tom. Thank you for taking my call. The Constitution provides for the process of impeachment, and it provides quite clearly that it is not a judicial process, it's a political process. And by gosh, we have it in our Constitution available to us to simply ask for a do-over. We don't know whether we did the right thing as American people when we elected Trump. So we want another shot at it.
Well, I'm not even sure we elected Trump, Richard.
Say again?
I'm not even sure we elected Trump. I think that people rigging elections in Wisconsin, Michigan, Ohio, and Pennsylvania elected Trump. Throwing hundreds of thousands of people off the voting rolls, putting voting machines in black neighborhoods in Detroit that don't record votes for president. I mean, I think this election was stolen. Richard, thank you for the call. And therefore, Trump is a completely illegitimate president. And frankly, I would love to see Robert Mueller looking into that. But, there doesn't seem to be a consensus around that. Anyhow, fascinating day. We'll be back tomorrow. In the meantime, don't forget, democracy is not a spectator sport. It is an all-in. Get your hands dirty. Start participating. Get out there. Get active. Tag you're it kind of game or business or whatever it is. We'll see you tomorrow. Have a great afternoon.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com. The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by X-Chair. The X-Chair chair, office chair. xchairtom.com is the website, xchairthom.com. The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally.
Call 800-568-9889 or go to tomsbeets.com. That's 800-568-9889, Tom's Beets, THOMSBEETS.com.